Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, it started in one corner, slowly curling inward as if the wall were exhaling. Behind it wasn't drywall, but scribbled writing in a child's hand. Page after page of shaky phrases repeated over and over. The last line said, "She told me to write it until she stops." When Sarah Mendelsohn purchased the century-old Victorian house on Juniper Street in the small town of Oak Ridge, Montana, she knew renovations would be necessary. The real estate listing had described the property as a handyman's dream with good bones, a euphemism for a structure requiring extensive work. But the price had been right for a recently divorced elementary school teacher starting over. The house sat on the edge of town, bordered by a small creek and a stretch of woods. Neighbors were few and far between, which suited Sarah just fine. She wanted space to breathe after her claustrophobic marriage had finally ended. On the day she found the writing, Sarah had been removing wallpaper in what would become her home office. The previous owners had left the place in a hurry, another red flag she'd chosen to ignore. The Carlsons had lived there for only 8 months before listing the property. When Sarah's realtor had inquired about their quick departure, Mrs. Carlson had simply said, "It wasn't for us." Sarah had been working through the afternoon, the radio playing softly as she carefully peeled back decades of decorating decisions. The house had been built in 1904, and the layers of wallpaper told stories of changing tastes through the decades. But in the northeast corner of the room, behind a section of faded floral print, she discovered something unexpected. What Sarah initially thought was old newspaper used as backing was actually notebook paper. Hundreds of pages had been glued directly to the plaster, covered over with wallpaper, and on every page, written in blue ballpoint pen in the unsteady handwriting of a child, were variations of the same phrases. "I will be good, I will be quiet, I will not tell about the basement, I will wait for mother to come back, she told me to write it until she stops." Looking at her discovery, Sarah felt a chill trace its way down her spine. The office had once been a bedroom, a child's bedroom. The writing seemed to be some form of punishment, the kind of repetitive discipline that had gone out of fashion decades ago, but the quantity of it was disturbing, and that last line, "She told me to write it until she stops." Until what stops, Sarah wondered. Her first instinct was to call the police, but she hesitated. What crime was she reporting? Ancient child discipline methods weren't illegal, just unsettling. Instead, she took photos and decided to inquire at the Oak Ridge Historical Society. If these writings were old, someone might remember the family who had lived here, if they were newer. Well, Sarah wasn't ready to consider that possibility. At the Historical Society, housed in a converted Victorian mansion not unlike her own, Sarah met Catherine Devereaux, a retired librarian who had documented local history for over 40 years. When Sarah showed her the photos, Catherine's friendly demeanor changed. "The Gardner house," she murmured, glancing up from the images. "I should have known when you mentioned Juniper Street." "Gardner house?" Sarah asked. "I thought the Carlsons were the previous owners." "They were," Catherine confirmed, "but before them the house stood empty for nearly 15 years, and before that, it belonged to Eliza Gardner and her daughter Abigail." Catherine moved to a filing cabinet and retrieved a thin folder. Inside were yellowed newspaper clippings. The headlines told fragments of a story: "Local girl missing, Search for Abigail Gardner continues. Mother claims daughter ran away. Abigail was 10 when she disappeared in 1987, Catherine explained. Her mother, Eliza, insisted she'd run away after an argument. The police searched but found nothing. No body, no evidence of foul play, but there were rumors. What kind of rumors? Sarah asked, her mouth suddenly dry. Eliza was strict. Neighbors reported hearing her shouting at Abigail at all hours. The girl was withdrawn at school. A teacher once noticed bruises on her arms, but when questioned, Abigail claimed she fell out of a tree. Sarah glanced back at the photos on her phone. You think the writing was Abigail's? Catherine nodded slowly. It fits with what people said about Eliza's disciplinary methods. When Abigail misbehaved, Eliza would make her write lines, sometimes for hours. But why put the paper on the walls? That I don't know, Catherine admitted. Eliza refused to let anyone into the house after Abigail disappeared. She became reclusive, only leaving for groceries. She died in 2002, heart attack. The house was tied up in probate for years since she had no living relatives. Sarah returned home that evening with a heaviness in her chest. She couldn't stop thinking about Abigail Gardner, a little girl forced to write the same lines over and over, then mysteriously vanishing. And one line in particular haunted her, "I will not tell about the basement." Sarah had only briefly inspected the basement when buying the house. It was unfinished, with concrete floors and stone foundation walls. She'd planned to use it for storage. Now she felt a growing need to examine it more carefully. The basement door was located off the kitchen. Sarah flipped the light switch at the top of the stairs, illuminating a bare bulb that cast long shadows across the space below. The air was damp and carried a faint, unpleasant odor, musty, with an undertone of something else. Taking a deep breath, Sarah descended the stairs. The concrete floor was stained and uneven. Against one wall stood a massive old furnace that had been replaced by a modern heating system. Opposite it was a large metal sink, the kind used for laundry in the days before washing machines. Near the back of the space was a door Sarah hadn't noticed during her initial tour. The door was small, perhaps 4 feet high, and appeared to lead to a crawl space or storage area. It was secured with a padlock that looked newer than its surroundings. Sarah tried the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. Over the next few days, Sarah tried to focus on her renovation plans, but her thoughts kept returning to Abigail Gardner. The writing on the wall, the rumors of abuse, the mysteriously locked door in the basement, it all suggested something sinister had occurred in this house. She made inquiries about the case at the local police station. Officer Jenkins, a middle-aged man who had been on the force for 20 years, remembered it well. "That was before my time on the force, but it's one of those cases everyone talks about," he explained. "We had a new chief come in about 5 years ago who reopened some cold cases. The Gardner disappearance was one of them." "Did they find anything new?" Sarah asked. Officer Jenkins hesitated. There were inconsistencies in Eliza's original statements, and the K-9 units brought in back then. Well, the dogs showed interest in the basement, but nothing was found during the search. "What about the locked room down there?" His expression changed. "What locked room?" The following day, Sarah stood in her basement with Officer Jenkins and Detective Morrow, who had been assigned to the reopened case. The detective, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a methodical manner, examined the padlocked door with interest. "This doesn't appear in any of the original search reports," she commented. "Either it was overlooked or it was added later. With Sarah's permission, they broke the lock. The small door creaked open to reveal a space about 6 feet square, with a dirt floor and rough stone walls. The beam of Detective Morrow's flashlight swept across the empty room. "Nothing," Officer Jenkins said, disappointment evident in his voice. But Detective Morrow wasn't satisfied. She knelt down, examining the dirt floor more closely. "This has been disturbed," she noted, "more recently than 30 years ago." The investigation that followed moved with deliberate slowness. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. The dirt floor was carefully excavated, and 3 feet down they found her. Abigail Gardner had never run away. The remains of a child, wrapped in a faded floral bedsheet that matched the description of Abigail's bedding, had been buried in the hidden room. Forensic analysis would later confirm the identity through dental records. In the months that followed, Sarah watched as her house became the center of a renewed investigation. The writing on the walls was carefully documented and preserved. The basement was thoroughly examined for additional evidence, and slowly a picture began to emerge of what had happened to Abigail Gardner. Investigators determined that Abigail had likely died from head trauma. Whether accidental or intentional remained unclear, but what was certain was that her mother had concealed her death, buried her in the basement, and continued to live in the house for 15 more years. The most disturbing discovery came when forensic analysts examined the ink used in the wall writings. While most of the pages had been written around the same time, the repetitions of "she told me to write it until she stops" were newer, dated to the period after Abigail's disappearance, and the handwriting analysis suggested they had been written by Eliza Gardner herself. "We think she was experiencing some kind of psychotic break," Detective Morrow explained to Sarah one evening. "Based on interviews with people who knew her, Eliza may have convinced herself that Abigail was still alive, still being punished. She would write as if she were her daughter, perhaps as a form of atonement." Sarah ultimately decided she couldn't live in the house after all. Too much darkness had seeped into its walls. The case of Abigail Gardner received national attention, featured on true crime shows and podcasts. The house on Juniper Street became known locally as the Writing House. Years later, the property remains unsold. Occasionally, curious teenagers break in, hoping to see the famous writing on the walls or feel some ghostly presence in the basement. But all they find is an empty house, slowly decaying, holding its secrets close. And sometimes locals swear they can see movement in the upstairs window, a corner of wallpaper slowly curling inward as if the wall were exhaling. Crime 2, the family had been gone for days, yet the guest bed was rumpled and the pillow held a fresh indentation. Beneath the covers, the sheets were damp with sweat. Taped to the underside of the mattress was a blurry Polaroid of someone sleeping in that very bed, from above. Detective Marion Whitley stood in the doorway of the Caldwell family's guest bedroom, her eyes moving methodically around the space. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Outside, the upscale neighborhood of Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania, remained characteristically quiet, the kind of silence that wealthy suburbs cultivate like a prized garden. "Nobody's been in this house for 10 days, Officer Reynolds reminded her, consulting his notes. "Family left for Cancun on the 17th. Neighbor called it in yesterday when she noticed the side door was ajar." Marion nodded but said nothing. She was thinking about Alina Caldwell, how the woman had meticulously locked every window, set the alarm system, and arranged for a house sitter who ultimately canceled at the last minute. Alina, a pediatric surgeon at Mercy Hospital, was known for her attention to detail. Her husband, James, taught economics at the local university. Their two daughters, Lily and Violet, attended the prestigious Westridge Academy. They were, by all accounts, a perfect family. But perfect families rarely called Detective Whitley to their homes. 3 weeks earlier, Alina Caldwell had been sitting in her office reviewing patient charts when her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained only a single image, a photo of her family's dining room table taken from inside their home. She dismissed it as a wrong number, deleted it, and continued with her day. The next morning, a second message arrived, their kitchen at night, lights on, and the day after, the master bedroom empty, but with the bed neatly made. Alina changed the locks the same day, but told no one, not even James. She convinced herself it was just teenagers playing pranks, or perhaps a realtor who had confused their address with another listing. She didn't file a police report. Successful people like Alina didn't overreact to small disturbances. They handled things quietly and efficiently. The messages stopped after the lock change. The Caldwells planned their vacation. Life continued its orderly progression. Until now. Prince, Marian asked, still standing in the guest bedroom doorway, unwilling to disturb what was clearly a crime scene. Nothing obvious. Whoever was here was careful. Officer Reynolds shifted his weight, the floorboards creaking beneath him. Alarm was disabled properly with the code, no signs of forced entry. Marian finally stepped into the room, her trained eyes catching details others might miss. The closet door was slightly open. A water glass sat on the nightstand, lipstick smudge on the rim. The bathroom connected to this guest room showed signs of recent use, a damp towel hung with precise symmetry, the cap of the toothpaste tube removed. Someone's been living here while they're gone, she said quietly, and they knew the alarm code. Reynolds nodded. Neighbor mentioned something else, said she saw lights on 2 nights ago, thought the Caldwells had come home early. When she texted Alina to welcome her back, Alina replied they were still in Mexico. Marian's attention returned to the Polaroid photo taped beneath the mattress. She carefully removed it, using the edge of her pen. The image showed a woman sleeping, face partially obscured by shadows, blonde hair spread across the pillow. The angle suggested the photographer had been standing on something to capture the image from above, perhaps a chair or small ladder. "Is that Mrs. Caldwell?" Reynolds asked, peering at the photo. "Hard to tell," Marian replied, though privately she thought it wasn't. The woman in the photo seemed younger, with different facial features than Alina Caldwell's DMV photo. "Get the tech team in here. Full workup, and I need to speak with the Caldwells immediately." James and Alina Caldwell cut their vacation short, arriving on a red-eye flight that left them exhausted and disoriented. They sat in their pristine living room, surrounded by the evidence technicians working throughout their home, their daughters sent to stay with Alina's sister. "I don't understand," James repeated for the 3rd time. His academic's demeanor, normally confident and slightly condescending, had given way to genuine confusion. Who would break in just to sleep here? Alina remained silent, her surgeon's hands folded tightly in her lap. Marian noticed the woman hadn't expressed surprise at the news, just quiet, contained fear. "Mrs. Caldwell," Marian began carefully, "had anything unusual happened before your trip? Any strangers around the house? Unusual phone calls? Anything that seemed off?" Aliner's eyes flicked toward her husband before she answered, "No, nothing." The lie hung in the air between them. Marion let it linger, waiting. James looked at his wife, Ellie. Aliner's composure finally cracked. There were some texts, photos of our house from inside. I changed the locks but didn't want to worry anyone. I thought it had stopped. James stood abruptly. "You didn't tell me. Someone was in our house taking pictures, and you kept it from me." "I handled it," Alina said, her voice hardening. "Or I thought I had." Marion interrupted their brewing argument. "Who else knows your alarm code, Mrs. Caldwell?" The list was short. The Caldwells themselves, Alina's sister, their regular house sitter Danielle Wright, and their former housekeeper Maria Vasquez, who had been let go 6 months earlier after 8 years of service. "Why did you fire Maria?" Marion asked, noting how Alina tensed at the question. "She was stealing," James answered quickly. "Small things at first, then jewelry. We didn't press charges, just asked her to leave." "That's not true," Alina said quietly. James looked at her sharply. "Maria wasn't stealing anything. I let her go because..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because I found her in this guest bedroom one afternoon. She said she was just resting during her lunch break, but she was in the bed under the covers. It felt inappropriate." Marion made a note. "And how did Maria take the termination?" "She was upset," Alina admitted. "She cried, said she needed the job, but it was too strange. She'd worked for us for years without incident, and suddenly I was finding her in odd places in the house at odd times." "Did you change the alarm code after letting her go?" The Caldwells exchanged a glance that answered the question before James shook his head no. Maria Vasquez lived in a small apartment 20 minutes away in the less affluent part of town. She opened her door to Marion's knock, a petite woman in her mid-30s with tired eyes and a cautious demeanor. "I'm working at the Hendersons' house today," she said immediately, as though anticipating accusation. "You can call them. I've been there since 7 this morning." Marion noted the defensive posture, the way Maria's eyes darted past her to check if others were waiting outside. "I just need to ask about the Caldwells," Marion explained, showing her badge. "May I come in?" Maria's apartment was immaculate but sparsely furnished. No photos adorned the walls, no personal touches beyond a small ceramic cross above the door. She offered Marion water in a spotless glass and sat with perfect posture on the edge of her couch. "When was the last time you were at the Caldwell residence?" Marion asked. "The day Mrs. Caldwell fired me, February 12th. The answer came quickly, precisely. "And you haven't been back since?" Maria's expression remained neutral. "No." "Do you know anyone who might want to spend time in their home while they're away? Someone who might know the alarm code?" A flicker of something recognition perhaps crossed Maria's face before disappearing. "I don't understand the question." Marion changed tactics. "Mrs. Caldwell said she let you go because she found you sleeping in the guest bedroom. Is that accurate?" Maria's hands tightened around her water glass. "I wasn't sleeping. I was making the bed and felt dizzy. I sat down for a moment, that's all." "But Mrs. Caldwell believed you were in the bed, under the covers." She believed what she wanted to believe. For the first time, emotion crept into Maria's voice, a quiet bitterness. 8 years I worked for them. 8 years of picking up after their children, listening to their fights, knowing all their secrets. And she fires me because one time I sit on a bed. Marian leaned forward slightly. What secrets, Maria? The question hung between them. Maria took a slow sip of water, then placed the glass down with deliberate care. Ask Mrs. Caldwell about her sister, she finally said. Ask her about how many times Catherine stayed in that guest bedroom last year while Dr. Caldwell was at medical conferences. Ask her why Catherine always left before Mr. Caldwell came home. Catherine Winters was not at her home when Marian arrived. According to her neighbor, she had left suddenly the previous evening with a small suitcase, mentioning something about a spa weekend. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Alina denied her sister had ever stayed over without the family's knowledge. James confirmed he knew nothing about such visits. Both appeared genuinely confused by Maria's claim or were exceptional actors. The forensic report from the guest bedroom yielded unexpected results. The fingerprints belonged not to Maria Vasquez or Catherine Winters, but to Danielle Wright, the house sitter who had supposedly canceled before the Caldwell's vacation. Danielle's apartment was empty when police arrived. Her landlord reported she had paid 6 months' rent in advance just 2 weeks earlier in cash. Her phone had been disconnected, her social media accounts deleted. The university where she claimed to be studying had no record of a student by that name. When shown a clear image of Danielle from the Caldwell's home security footage from a month earlier, Maria Vasquez's face drained of color. "That's not Danielle," she whispered. "That's Catherine's daughter, Allison." The threads of the case unraveled rapidly after that revelation. Allison Winters, Catherine's 19-year-old daughter, had been estranged from her family for nearly 2 years. According to police records, she had struggled with mental health issues and had been briefly institutionalized following an incident at her high school. Catherine had never mentioned her daughter to the Caldwells, claiming she was childless when she married her current husband 3 years earlier. Alina was stunned by the deception. Catherine told us Allison was a friend's daughter she was mentoring, she explained to Marian. She brought her to our Christmas party last year. That's how she met Danielle. They were talking all evening. I had no idea they were actually mother and daughter. Further investigation revealed that Danielle Wright was an identity Allison had created, complete with falsified references and a manufactured background. She had applied to be the Caldwell's house sitter months earlier, playing a long game. The Polaroid found under the mattress was eventually identified as an image of Catherine Winters, taken during one of her unauthorized stays in the guest bedroom, evidence of the affair with James that Maria had alluded to, which both James and Catherine continued to deny. 3 days after the investigation began, Catherine Winters' car was found abandoned at a scenic overlook in the mountains 2 hours from Oak Ridge. A note in the glove compartment contained just 4 words: "She knows everything now." Despite an extensive search, neither Catherine nor Allison was located. The guest bedroom in the Caldwell's home remained undisturbed, preserved exactly as it had been found: the rumpled sheets, the damp towel, the water glass with its lipstick smudge. Marian often returned to stand in that doorway, piecing together the psychological puzzle of a young woman who had created an elaborate scheme just to sleep in the same bed where her estranged mother had conducted a secret affair. The Caldwells eventually sold their house, unable to feel comfortable there again. James and Alina separated 6 months later. Maria Vasquez moved to another state. Detective Whitley kept the case file open, checking periodically for signs of Catherine or Allison surfacing. But the most disturbing discovery came nearly a year later, when the new owners of the Caldwell house renovated the guest bedroom and found additional Polaroids hidden inside the heating vent, dozens of them, showing various members of the Caldwell family sleeping in their beds, each photo dated meticulously on the back. The earliest was from 3 years before Allison had ever set foot in their home. And none of the doors or windows had been forced open in any of those nights. Crime 3, every angle was wrong, walls curved, lines bent inward unnaturally. Light didn't behave as it should. When they brought in measuring tools, they found the floor space shifted slightly depending on where you stood. On one wall, carved faintly, "She hates corners." This was what Detective Michael Reeves encountered on a cold Thursday morning in November 2017, standing in the basement of 247 Laurel Avenue, Marion County, Indiana. The house belonged to Alina Marsh, a 63-year-old retired mathematics professor who had lived alone since her husband's death in 2006. She had been reported missing by her niece, Caroline, 3 days prior. Alina was a creature of habit. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., she would call her niece to discuss their shared New York Times crossword puzzle, a tradition they had maintained for nearly 8 years. On Monday, November 6th, that call never came. By evening, after 15 unanswered calls and no response to knocks at the door, Caroline contacted the Marion County Sheriff's Department. The responding officers found nothing outwardly suspicious. Alina's 2012 Volvo was parked in the garage. Her house was orderly, bed made, dishes done. Only one detail struck them as unusual. Her purse, containing her wallet, keys, and medication, was still sitting on the kitchen counter. Alina never left home without her essentials. Detective Reeves was assigned to the case 48 hours later when the search yielded no results. He had specialized in missing persons for 12 years and recognized the troubled pattern immediately: an older person living alone, vanishing without warning signs. Usually these cases ended in tragedy, health emergencies, accidents in remote locations, or occasionally suicide. But Alina's case felt different from the moment Reeves stepped through her front door. The house felt like it was breathing, he would later tell a colleague, not in any supernatural way, just in how methodically organized everything was, like someone had measured every single object's placement. Alina's life seemed to revolve around precision, books arranged by height to the millimeter, clothes in her closet organized by color in perfect gradient, kitchen utensils aligned with mathematical accuracy. When Reeves opened her desk drawer, he found pencils arranged parallel to each other, exactly 1 centimeter apart. Her neighbors described her as brilliant but increasingly eccentric over the years. Alina had taught advanced topography and non-Euclidean geometry at Indiana University until her retirement 5 years earlier. Students remembered her as demanding but fair, frequently saying, "Conventional thinking creates conventional limitations." The investigation shifted dramatically when Reeves found a hidden door behind a bookshelf in Alina's study, a classic click that seemed strangely out of character for the methodical woman. The door led to a narrow staircase and the basement that had never appeared on any property records. And this basement, with its impossible angles, was where everything about the case changed. "It's not physically possible," said the forensic architect called to examine the space. "These walls can't exist like this, not structurally, and yet." The basement contained only 3 items: a desk with a leather-bound journal, a chair, and a large circular rug covering most of the floor. The journal contained hundreds of pages of mathematical equations and diagrams, becoming increasingly erratic toward the final entries. The last coherent entry, dated November 5th, the day before Alina disappeared, read simply, "I've solved it after all these years. The mathematics confirms what I've always suspected. There are spaces between spaces. What we perceive is merely the shadow of true geometric reality. I have found the way through where she waits." Caroline identified the handwriting as her aunt's, but was bewildered by the content. Aunt Alina was eccentric, sure, but she was grounded in reality. This sounds unhinged. Detective Reeves learned that Alina's descent into obsession had begun after her husband's death. Robert Marsh had been her mathematical partner, collaborating on theoretical papers about dimensional topology. His death had been ruled a suicide. He had disappeared for 3 days before his body was found in the woods 5 miles from their home. The autopsy revealed no signs of foul play, just a note in his pocket with coordinates that led nowhere. What troubled Reeves most was the striking similarity between Robert's disappearance and Alina's. Both had vanished without a trace, leaving behind their essential belongings. Both had been working on the same mathematical theories before vanishing. When the forensics team lifted the circular rug in the basement, they found something inexplicable. The concrete floor beneath contained an elaborate geometric pattern carved directly into the material, intersecting lines, circles, and symbols forming what one officer described as a mathematical crop circle. Caroline recognized some of the symbols from her aunt's work. This is her life's research, spatial anomalies and geometric paradoxes. She believed certain mathematical configurations could alter physical space. For weeks, the investigation stalled. No financial activity, no sign of Alina anywhere. Lab tests on the basement came back with perplexing results. The concrete analysis showed the carvings were made over many years, some dating back decades, long before Alina and Robert had purchased the house in 1997. Then came the breakthrough that only deepened the mystery. A property record search revealed that in 1953, the previous owner's 8-year-old daughter had disappeared from the house. According to yellowed newspaper clippings, young Abigail Wilson had been playing hide-and-seek when she vanished. The last person to see her, a playmate, claimed Abigail had said she found a special hiding place with no corners where no one would ever find her. The investigation took another turn when Detective Reeves interviewed Dr. Lena Hoffman, Alina's former academic colleague. Dr. Hoffman reluctantly shared email exchanges from the months before Alina's disappearance. Alina believed she'd found mathematical evidence of what she called fold points in physical space, theoretical locations where dimensional boundaries weaken, Dr. Hoffman explained. She was convinced her husband hadn't committed suicide but had accidentally found one of these points. The emails revealed Alina's growing certainty that her basement contained such a fold point, activated by specific geometric configurations. More disturbing was her belief that she could hear voices coming from the other side of this theoretical boundary, specifically a child's voice. As weeks turned to months, Detective Reeves found himself returning to Alina's basement repeatedly, measuring, photographing, and attempting to make sense of the spatial anomalies. The angles still didn't add up, light still behaved strangely, and despite all logical explanations attempted by structural engineers, the measurements still shifted depending on where one stood. One evening, while reviewing case notes alone in the basement, Reeves noticed something he'd missed before. When viewed from a specific angle, the carved pattern on the floor aligned perfectly with the faint inscription on the wall, "She hates corners." Reeves photographed this alignment and sent it to Dr. Hoffman, who responded within hours. This is it. This is what Alina was working toward. These are activation parameters. The final piece came from Caroline, who found an old photograph in a family album, a black and white image of young Abigail Wilson from 1953. The girl was holding a drawing of what appeared to be a circular room with the words, "My special place has no corners," written in childish handwriting. The case remains officially open. Alina Marsh is still listed as missing. The house on Laurel Avenue stands empty, the basement sealed by authorities citing structural concerns. Detective Reeves requested transfer to another department 6 months after beginning the investigation. In his final case notes, sealed by his request, he wrote only, "Some spaces aren't meant to be understood. Some disappearances aren't meant to be solved. I've stood in that basement for hours, and sometimes when the light hits the floor pattern just right, I swear I can hear voices, a woman and a child, talking about mathematics and corners and the spaces in between spaces." The Marion County Record's Office now lists the basement at 247 Laurel Avenue as architecturally nonconforming. Measurement discrepancies remain unexplained, and occasionally neighbors report seeing lights in the sealed basement windows, lights that seem to bend in ways light shouldn't. The mathematical journals of Alina Marsh have been requested by several research institutions but remain in police evidence storage. Caroline visits the house once a year, on the anniversary of her aunt's disappearance, and leaves flowers on the front porch. She never goes inside. She says the house feels like it's watching her, waiting. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some corners of reality are better left unexplored. And sometimes, as Alina Marsh may have discovered, the greatest danger lies not in what we can't understand, but in understanding something we were never meant to comprehend. Crime 4, the crib was empty. It had been for months, but the baby monitor still clicked on each night, broadcasting deep, slow breathing. No voices, no cries, just that sound. When they opened the device, they found a small bone lodged inside, wrapped in gauze, tagged with a name no one recognized. Sarah and Michael Dawson lived in the quiet suburb of Cedar Mills, Minnesota. Their street was lined with identical craftsman houses, each with a well-manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. The Dawsons had moved to the neighborhood 4 years ago, drawn by the good schools and low crime rate. Sarah worked as a nurse at the regional hospital, while Michael ran his own accounting firm from a home office. They had a daughter, Emma, who had just turned 3 when they decided to move her from the nursery to her big girl room across the hall. The nursery remained empty for several months. Sarah would occasionally stand in the doorway, staring at the unused crib, the changing table, the rocking chair in the corner. She and Michael had been trying for a second child, but it hadn't happened yet. Still, they kept the room ready, just in case. On Tuesday, April 18th, 2023, Sarah was cleaning the nursery when she noticed the baby monitor on the shelf. She picked it up, examining the device they hadn't used since Emma moved rooms. The parent unit sat on her nightstand still, more out of habit than necessity. She pressed the power button, not expecting anything to happen after all this time. But the small green light came on, indicating it still worked. That night at 2:17 a.m., Sarah woke to a sound coming from the monitor. A deep, slow breathing, rhythmic, in and out, in and out. She reached over and turned on her bedside lamp, checking the volume. The sound continued, steady and unbroken. Michael stirred beside her. "What is it?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "The monitor," Sarah whispered. "I think it's picking something up." Michael sat up, listening to the breathing. Must be interference from somewhere. Turn it off. Sarah pressed the power button, but the sound continued. The green light remained on. She unplugged it from the wall, but the backup batteries kept it functioning. The breathing continued, unchanging in its rhythm. "I'm going to check the nursery," Sarah said, already getting out of bed. "I'll come with you," Michael replied, reaching for his glasses. The nursery was bathed in pale moonlight. The crib stood empty, just as it had been for months. The room was cold, colder than the rest of the house. Sarah shivered as she walked to the crib, running her hand over the mattress. Nothing. She checked the closet behind the curtains under the crib. The room was empty. Yet the breathing continued through the monitor. "It must be picking up a signal from somewhere else," Michael reasoned, though his voice betrayed his unease. "Maybe a neighbor's monitor." But none of their neighbors had infants. The closest family with a baby lived 3 houses down, and baby monitors didn't have that kind of range. The next morning, Sarah called the manufacturer. The customer service representative suggested it might be interference from another electronic device. "Try resetting it," she advised. Sarah did, holding down the reset button for 10 seconds. The device powered off, then back on. The breathing had stopped. That night, Sarah and Michael went to bed without incident. The monitor remained silent until 2:17 a.m. when the breathing returned. This time it sounded closer, as if someone were breathing directly into the microphone. Sarah immediately woke Michael. "It's happening again," she whispered, her heart racing. Michael took the monitor, examining it closely. "This doesn't make sense. It has to be broken." He went to the nursery where the transmitting unit sat on the shelf. The green light was on, indicating it was working. He unplugged it, removed the batteries, and brought it back to their bedroom. "I'll take it apart tomorrow," he promised. "See if there's something wrong with it." The next day, Michael worked from home. During his lunch break, he spread a towel over the kitchen table and began disassembling the baby monitor with a small screwdriver. Sarah was at the hospital for a 12-hour shift, and Emma was at preschool. The house was quiet as he carefully removed the plastic casing. Inside, he found something that made his blood run cold. Wedged between the circuit board and the speaker was a small object wrapped in what looked like gauze. Michael carefully extracted it with tweezers, placing it on the towel. With steady hands, he unwrapped the yellowed material. Inside was a small bone, no longer than an inch. Tied to it with thread was a small paper tag. Written on it in faded ink was a name, Charlotte Reynolds. Michael stared at the bone, his mind racing. Who was Charlotte Reynolds? How did this get inside their baby monitor? They'd purchased it new just before Emma was born. He called Sarah at work, his voice shaking as he told her what he'd found. "Don't touch anything else," she instructed. "I'm coming home now." When Sarah arrived home, she examined the bone with her trained medical eye. "It looks like a finger bone," she said quietly. "A phalange from a child." They called the police. Detective Laura Hayes arrived within the hour. She was in her mid-40s with graying hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and eyes that had seen too much. She listened carefully as Michael and Sarah explained the situation, her face betraying nothing as she examined the bone and tag. "We'll need to take this for analysis," she said, carefully placing the items in an evidence bag. "And I'd like to take the monitor as well." "Who is Charlotte Reynolds?" Sarah asked. "Is she missing? Is she..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Detective Hayes shook her head. I don't know, but I'll find out. In the meantime, I'd like to ask you some questions about the monitor. Where did you purchase it? At Target, Michael answered. About 4 years ago, before Emma was born. And it's been in your possession the entire time. Yes, Sarah confirmed. It was in Emma's room until she moved across the hall about 6 months ago. Then it sat in the nursery, unused, until I turned it on 2 days ago. Detective Hayes made notes in her small notebook. And you've never had anyone work on it, no repairs. They both shook their heads. All right, I'll be in touch as soon as we know more. In the meantime, if anything else unusual happens, call me immediately. She handed them her card and left with the evidence. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the bone, the name. Charlotte Reynolds, who was she? What happened to her? And how did part of her end up in their baby monitor? The following afternoon, Detective Hayes called. We've identified Charlotte Reynolds, she said, her voice somber. She was reported missing in 2018 from Lakeville, about 30 miles from you. She was 2 years old. Sarah felt her stomach drop in the bone. It's been confirmed as human. A child's proximal phalange, finger bone. DNA testing is underway to confirm if it belongs to Charlotte. But how did it get in our monitor? Michael asked, his voice strained. That's what we need to figure out, Detective Hayes replied. I'd like to come back and look at your house, specifically the nursery, and I need to know more about the previous owners. The Dawsons had purchased the house from an elderly couple, the Millers, who were moving to Florida for retirement. They'd lived in the house for over 40 years. Detective Hayes arrived with a crime scene technician. They examined the nursery carefully, removing the outlet cover where the monitor had been plugged in, checking the walls, the floor, the ceiling. They found nothing unusual. We need to trace the monitor's path, Hayes explained, from manufacture to your home. The investigation revealed that the batch of monitors had been assembled at a factory in Michigan, then shipped to a distribution center in Chicago before being delivered to Target stores across the Midwest. Nothing in the supply chain explained how the bone could have been placed inside. 3 days later, DNA results confirmed that the bone belonged to Charlotte Reynolds. Her parents, who had divorced shortly after her disappearance, were notified. The case, which had gone cold after months without leads, was reopened. Detective Hayes returned to the Dawson home with a new theory. We looked into the previous owners, the Millers, she explained. Mr. Miller worked as a janitor at Lakeville Elementary School until his retirement in 2019. Charlotte Reynolds' older brother attended that school. You think Mr. Miller had something to do with Charlotte's disappearance? Sarah asked, horrified. We don't know, but it's a connection we need to investigate. Did you ever meet the Millers? Just at the closing, Michael said. They seemed like a nice, normal couple. We'd like to speak with them in Florida, Hayes said. In the meantime, we want to do a more thorough search of your home, particularly the walls and floors of the nursery. There may be evidence we missed. The Dawsons stayed with Sarah's parents while a team of investigators tore open sections of drywall, pulled up floorboards, and examined the spaces between the walls of their home. On the second day of searching, they found something in the crawl space beneath the nursery floor. A small cloth bundle containing more bones, tiny fingers and toes, all wrapped in the same yellowed gauze, each tagged with different names. Charlotte Reynolds, Daniel Patel, Maria Gonzalez, 4 more children who had gone missing between 2015 and 2019. The investigation shifted entirely to Arnold Miller, the former homeowner. Florida police located the Millers in their retirement community. When questioned, Mrs. Miller broke down, revealing a terrible secret she'd kept for years. "He would bring things home," she whispered to the detectives. "Little things at first, a hair clip, a small shoe. I didn't want to know. I told myself he found them at the school, lost items, but then I found the bones." Arnold Miller had been collecting trophies from his victims, children who crossed his path through his work at various schools and community centers. The police theory was that he had hidden a piece of Charlotte Reynolds in the baby monitor as a way of keeping her close, listening to her through the device meant to protect children. When the Millers sold their house to move to Florida, Arnold had left the monitor behind, unable to take his secret with him, but unwilling to part with it completely. The breathing that Sarah and Michael heard remained unexplained. Some suggested it was interference, others believed it was their own fears manifesting. Detective Hayes had a different theory. "Sometimes," she said quietly to Sarah as the investigation was wrapping up, "I think the universe finds ways to make sure secrets don't stay buried. Those children needed to be found. They needed someone to hear them." Arnold Miller was arrested and charged with the murders of 6 children. The remains found in the Dawson home provided the evidence needed to connect him to each disappearance. Sarah and Michael never returned to live in that house. They couldn't bring themselves to sleep under the same roof, to watch Emma play in rooms that had concealed such horror. They sold the house at a loss and moved across the state, trying to put distance between themselves and the nightmare they had unwittingly stumbled into. But sometimes in the deepest part of night, Sarah still wakes at exactly 2:17 a.m., certain she can hear breathing in the darkness. Slow, rhythmic, waiting to be heard. Crime 5, it was subtle at first, a slight shift in direction. The family kept rotating it back, but each morning the couch had turned again, always toward the same wall. When they pulled the drywall apart, they found dozens of photographs stapled inside, all taken from the angle of the couch. The Brennan family had moved to 1487 Oakwood Drive in the summer of 2018. Amelia Brennan, her husband Craig, and their 2 children, 11-year-old Tyler and 8-year-old Emma, were excited about their new start in Pinewood, Ohio. The small town of just under 15,000 residents was known for its excellent school district and safe neighborhoods, a welcome change from their cramped apartment in Cincinnati. The 2-story colonial-style home had been built in 1973 and had only 2 previous owners. The last owners, an elderly couple named Howard and Ruth Miller, had lived there for 27 years before deciding to move to Florida to be closer to their grandchildren. The Millers had maintained the house well, though the interior was dated. The Brennans planned to renovate gradually, starting with the kitchen and living room. The living room renovation was scheduled for the fall. Until then, they arranged their furniture as best they could. Their chocolate brown sectional sofa, a wedding gift from Craig's parents, was positioned against the east wall, facing the television mounted on the west wall. A coffee table sat between them, and 2 small end tables flanked the sofa. It was a comfortable arrangement, perfect for family movie nights. The first incident occurred 3 weeks after they moved in. Amelia came downstairs one morning to find the sectional had shifted about 15 degrees, now angled slightly toward the north wall instead of directly facing the television. She thought little of it, assuming Craig had moved it while vacuuming the night before, though she couldn't recall him mentioning it. She pushed it back into place and went about her morning routine. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, the shift was more noticeable, nearly 30 degrees. Amelia asked Craig about it, but he denied moving the furniture. They questioned the children, who also denied any involvement. The family collectively agreed it was strange, but ultimately blamed it on the uneven hardwood floors, which they planned to refinish eventually. Craig used a level to check the floor and made small adjustments to the sofa's position, ensuring it was stable. For nearly a week, everything remained normal. Then one Monday morning in late July, Amelia descended the stairs to find the sofa had not only shifted but had completely rotated, now directly facing the north wall, a blank wall with no television, no artwork, nothing to face at all. "Craig," she called upstairs, her voice betraying her unease. "Did you move the couch last night?" Craig appeared at the top of the stairs, still in his pajamas, hair disheveled from sleep. "No, why would I?" His voice trailed off as he joined her in the living room and saw the rearranged furniture. What the hell? They checked the doors and windows, all locked from the inside. The alarm system showed no entries or exits during the night. The children were still asleep in their beds, and nothing else in the house appeared disturbed. Nothing was missing. It was just the couch, turned to face a blank wall. They rotated it back together, the scraping sound of the heavy furniture against the hardwood filling the quiet morning. Craig took photos of the room with his phone, documenting the position of the furniture. That evening, before heading to bed, he set up his laptop on the kitchen counter, its camera aimed at the living room, recording. The next morning, they reviewed the footage together. At 2:47 a.m., the video showed the couch beginning to move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, then with increasing momentum, it rotated toward the north wall. There was no visible cause, no person, no pet, nothing to explain the movement. The video quality was too low in the darkness to detect any subtle forces that might have been at work. "It has to be the kids playing a prank," Craig insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. They confronted Tyler and Emma over breakfast, showing them the video. Both children appeared genuinely confused and frightened. Emma began to cry, asking if they could move to a different house. Tyler, trying to appear brave for his little sister, suggested it might be a ghost, but quickly retracted the comment when he saw his mother's worried expression. That day, Craig called a flooring specialist who came to examine the hardwood. The specialist confirmed there was a slight slope in the floor, about a 2-degree angle, but insisted it wasn't enough to cause furniture to move on its own, especially not in the specific pattern they were experiencing. He recommended refinishing the floors, but couldn't explain the couch's behavior. For the next 3 nights, the family took turns staying awake, watching the living room. Nothing happened during their vigils. The couch remained perfectly still. But on the 4th night, when exhaustion forced them all to sleep, they awoke to find the couch facing the north wall again. This time, Craig decided to examine the wall itself. It was an interior wall separating the living room from a small den that they used as a home office. He tapped along the drywall, listening for any hollow spots or abnormalities. Near the center of the wall, the sound changed, a duller thud than the rest of the surface. "There's something here," he told Amelia, placing his palm flat against the spot. "It feels different." Amelia approached cautiously, placing her hand next to his. "It's colder than the rest of the wall," she observed. Craig retrieved a stud finder from his toolbox. The device indicated something unusual behind the drywall, not a stud, but something else, something irregular. Curiosity overcoming caution, Craig decided to cut into the wall. He sent the children to a neighbor's house for the afternoon, not wanting them to witness whatever they might discover. With Amelia standing nervously behind him, Craig carefully cut a small square into the drywall with a utility knife. He removed the section slowly, revealing a space between the studs that contained something unexpected. Not wiring or plumbing, but paper, dozens of photographs stapled to the inside face of the opposite drywall panel. Craig carefully extended his hand into the cavity and detached one of the photos. It showed their living room, but from years ago, with different furniture, different decor. The perspective of the photo was from where their couch now stood, facing directly at this wall. The timestamp in the corner read 5/17/2003. He removed another, this one from 2005, then 2007. Year after year, photos taken from the same perspective, always facing this wall. Some showed people, a different family, sitting in their living room, unaware they were being photographed. Others showed the room empty. The most recent photos were dated just months before the Millers moved out. "Call the police," Amelia whispered, her face pale. The investigation that followed revealed a disturbing history. Before the Millers purchased the home in 1991, it had belonged to a man named Leonard Gaines. Gaines had been a quiet, unremarkable resident of Pinewood, a bachelor who worked as an accountant at a local firm. What neighbors didn't know was that Gaines had developed an obsession with surveillance. Detective Sarah Reeves of the Pinewood Police Department explained to the Brennans that Gaines had installed hidden cameras throughout the house, including one in the north wall of the living room. The camera had been removed years ago, but the cavity remained, as did the photographs he had taken, evidence of his voyeuristic tendencies that somehow had never been discovered during previous renovations. "But that doesn't explain why the couch keeps moving," Craig insisted. Detective Reeves had no answer for that. The investigation uncovered no mechanical devices, no hidden mechanisms that could cause furniture to move. The photos were collected as evidence, the wall was repaired, and the police increased patrols in the neighborhood, though they assured the Brennans there was no immediate threat. Gaines had died in a car accident in 1990. The Brennans considered moving, but ultimately decided to stay and accelerate their renovation plans. They completely gutted the living room, removing all the drywall down to the studs, refinishing the floors and repainting. They even replaced the sectional sofa with a new one. For several weeks, everything seemed normal. The new couch remained where they placed it. The children slowly regained their comfort in the home. Amelia and Craig began to relax, attributing the strange occurrences to an old house settling, or perhaps their own heightened imaginations after discovering the disturbing photos. Then on a crisp October morning, Amelia came downstairs to find their new sofa had rotated overnight. Once again, it faced the north wall. On the coffee table in front of it sat a single Polaroid photograph, one that hadn't been in the wall collection, one they had never seen before. It showed their family, asleep in their beds, dated the previous night. The Brennans moved out that day. The house at 1487 Oakwood Drive remains empty. Local real estate agents struggle to explain why prospective buyers lose interest after viewing the property. Those who spend more than an hour inside often report an unsettling feeling of being watched. Sometimes neighbors walking past at night claim they can see, through the bare windows, the outline of a couch in the empty living room, always facing the north wall. Crime 6, behind the cereal boxes and canned goods taped neatly to the wood, were dozens of crayon drawings, stick figures, crying eyes, red scribbles. One showed the outline of the pantry itself, with the words, "He lives here now," written in blocky handwriting, but the figure drawn inside wasn't human. In the small town of Millridge, Connecticut, where the oak trees had witnessed generations come and go, Emma Nichols had always been known as the quiet one. Even as a child, she preferred the company of her sketchbooks to the neighborhood kids who played tag in cul-de-sacs. Her parents, a high school history teacher and a part-time librarian, never pushed her to be more outgoing. "Emma has her own rhythm," her mother would say when other parents asked. By 32, Emma had found a comfortable place in the world. She taught art at Millridge Elementary, living in a modest Cape Cod-style house she'd inherited from her grandmother. Her students adored her. Parents commented on how their children would come home talking about Miss Emma and her magical way of making even reluctant artists feel capable. She'd been teaching there for 7 years when Caleb Watson transferred into her second grade class in October 2019. Caleb was thin for his age, with ash blonde hair that fell across his forehead in wisps. His eyes, an unusual amber color, seemed too old for his small face. Emma noticed immediately how he kept to himself during recess, drawing intricate patterns in a notebook while other children chased each other across the playground. When she asked about his previous school, he would only say it was far away, his voice barely audible. The boys' father, Marcus Watson, had moved them to Millridge after his wife's death earlier that year. Car accident, he'd explained briefly at the parent-teacher conference in November. Emma remembered how his fingers had trembled slightly as he signed Caleb's permission slips. "We're still adjusting," he said. "Caleb's been having nightmares. The school counselor thinks art might help him process things." Over the following weeks, Emma gave Caleb special attention. She set aside supplies for him, the softest pastels, the smoothest paper, and encouraged him to express whatever he needed to. At first, his drawings were like any child's: houses, trees, a family holding hands. But by December, his artwork had begun to change. The colors grew darker, the figures more distorted. Houses appeared with shadowy attics. Faceless beings lurked in corners. Emma kept these drawings in a separate folder, unsure whether to be concerned or to see it as healthy emotional processing. She mentioned it casually to the school counselor, who suggested monitoring the situation but saw no immediate cause for alarm. On January 15th, 2020, Emma didn't show up for work. The school secretary called her cell phone, then her home number, receiving no answer for either. Emma had never missed a day without notice in 7 years of teaching. By noon, the principal had called Emma's emergency contact, her cousin Diane, who lived one town over. Diane drove to Emma's house using the spare key she'd always kept. The front door was locked. Nothing seemed disturbed in the living room. Emma's car sat in the driveway. Her phone lay on the kitchen counter alongside a half-empty cup of tea, but Emma was nowhere to be found. The bedroom was undisturbed, bed made with hospital corners as Emma always preferred. The bathroom held no clues. It wasn't until Diane opened the pantry door that she screamed, dropping to her knees in the kitchen. Detective Michael Renner arrived 40 minutes after Diane's 911 call. A 20-year veteran of the Millridge Police Department, Renner had investigated 3 murders, dozens of burglaries, and 1 kidnapping during his career. But what he saw in Emma Nichols' pantry made his stomach twist. It was like walking into a child's nightmare, he later told his partner. The interior walls were lined with drawings, dozens of them, taped in neat rows. Unlike the refrigerator artwork proud parents display, these images disturbed him on a primal level. Children with hollow eyes, dark figures standing over beds, a recurring character that looked like a tall man with impossibly long arms and no face. And one drawing of the pantry itself, with a stick figure trapped inside, surrounded by what looked like small, grinning shadows. The most concerning discovery was what appeared to be fresh crayon marks on the floor, a partial circle that looked interrupted, as though whoever was drawing it had stopped suddenly. A red crayon lay broken nearby. Emma Nichols had vanished without taking her phone, wallet, or car keys. No signs of forced entry were found. No evidence of struggle appeared anywhere in the house. The case might have been classified as a voluntary disappearance if not for one detail: a child-sized handprint in what appeared to be black paint on the inside of the pantry door. A handprint that, when tested, turned out not to be paint at all, but a mixture of soil and what the lab would later identify as ash. The investigation quickly turned toward Caleb Watson and his father. Detectives visited their apartment the following day, finding Marcus cooperative but visibly anxious. "Caleb's been through enough," he insisted, his voice breaking. "His mother's death nearly destroyed him. Please don't make things worse." The boy sat silently on the couch during the interview, drawing in his ever-present sketchbook. When Detective Renner asked to see what he was drawing, Caleb handed over the book without hesitation. The page showed a crude rendering of Emma's house, with a dark swirl where the pantry would be. "Can you tell me about Miss Emma?" Renner asked gently. Caleb looked up, his amber eyes unnervingly calm. "She's with the quiet people now," he said. "They came from the walls to get her." Child psychologists were brought in to interview Caleb more thoroughly. Their reports described him as disconnected from reality and processing trauma through elaborate fantasy constructions. His father explained that since his mother's death, Caleb had developed an imaginary world populated by what he called the quiet people, beings that lived in walls and whispered to him at night. Meanwhile, the investigation into Emma's background revealed nothing suspicious. Her bank accounts remained untouched. Her internet search history showed nothing beyond lesson plans and Netflix selections. Friends described her as content, if somewhat solitary. No romantic entanglements, no enemies. 3 weeks after her disappearance, the case took an unexpected turn when police received a call from a hiker who had found something unusual in Blackwood Forest, about 6 miles from Emma's home. In a small clearing surrounded by winter-bare trees was what appeared to be a child's fort made of branches and mud. Inside, investigators found one of Emma's scarves and a collection of small, smooth stones arranged in a perfect circle. Detective Renner returned to question Marcus Watson again, this time with more urgency. Had Caleb ever mentioned Blackwood Forest? Did he ever go there with his mother before she died? Marcus seemed genuinely confused. They had moved to Millridge after his wife's death. Neither of them had ever been to that forest. But when Renner mentioned the stone circle, Marcus's face drained of color. "Sarah, my wife, she used to make those," he whispered. "With Caleb, it was their special thing, gathering smooth stones and arranging them in circles. She called them protection rings. I thought it was just a game." The forest site yielded no further evidence of Emma's whereabouts. Ground-penetrating radar showed no disturbances in the soil. Cadaver dogs detected nothing. It was as if the scarf had been placed there deliberately, like a message no one could decipher. On February 12th, exactly 4 weeks after Emma vanished, Marcus Watson called 911 at 3:17 a.m. The recording captured his frantic breathing before he managed to speak. "He's gone, Caleb's gone. His window is open, and there's drawings all over his room that weren't there when I put him to bed. Please, please help me." Officers arrived to find Marcus in a state of panic. Caleb's bedroom walls were covered with dozens of drawings, eerily similar to those found in Emma's pantry. The window was indeed open, though there was no way a 7-year-old could have reached the latch without assistance. Outside in the snow, a single set of child-sized footprints led away from the building, then mysteriously stopped at the edge of the parking lot as if Caleb had simply vanished mid-step. The search for Caleb Watson consumed the town. Volunteers combed Blackwood Forest and the surrounding areas. His face appeared on local news and social media. Marcus barely slept, accompanying search parties despite the February cold that left his lips blue and his hands shaking. 3 days into the search, a deputy's flashlight beam caught something reflective near a small cave entrance deep in Blackwood Forest. It was a crayon, the same type Emma kept in her classroom. Inside the shallow cave, searchers found Caleb, curled in a ball and barely conscious, suffering from hypothermia but alive. And next to him, her arms wrapped protectively around the boy's small body, was Emma Nichols. Both were hospitalized. Emma, suffering from more severe exposure and dehydration, remained unconscious for 2 days. When she finally opened her eyes, the story she told made little sense to investigators. She claimed to remember nothing between standing in her pantry, looking at Caleb's disturbing artwork she had collected out of concern, and waking up in the cave with the boy beside her. She had no explanation for the intervening 25 days, no memory of how she'd gotten to the forest or survived without supplies. Caleb's account was equally confusing. He insisted that the quiet people had taken Miss Emma because she saw their pictures and that he had followed them to bring her back. When asked directly if his father had anything to do with Emma's disappearance, Caleb became agitated, repeating, "The quiet people live in the walls. Dad can't see them, but I can." Child Protective Services placed Caleb in temporary foster care while investigating Marcus Watson. What they found troubled them deeply. Before moving to Millridge, the Watsons had lived in 4 different towns within 2 years. In each location there had been incidents. A babysitter who disappeared for 3 days, only to be found wandering along a highway with no memory of where she'd been. A next-door neighbor who claimed to have seen Caleb talking to empty corners. A kindergarten teacher who had taken medical leave after what her doctors called a stress-induced dissociative episode. Most disturbing was the circumstance of Sarah Watson's death. The car accident had been ruled a single-vehicle incident. Her car had veered off a bridge with no signs of mechanical failure or impairment. But investigators discovered that in the weeks before her death, Sarah had been consulting with a psychiatrist about Caleb's increasingly disturbing behavior and had scheduled an appointment with a specialist in childhood schizophrenia. Emma Nichols eventually recovered physically but refused to return to her home. The house remained empty, a silent reminder of a mystery that gripped Millridge. She moved to Vermont to live with her parents, declining all interview requests and leaving her teaching career behind. Marcus Watson was never charged with any crime. No evidence connected him directly to Emma's disappearance or to his son's brief vanishing. He and Caleb moved away from Millridge just 6 months later, leaving no forwarding address. The pantry in Emma's abandoned house was repainted by the real estate company trying to sell the property. But prospective buyers often commented on the oddly shaped stains that seemed to seep through the new paint, dark outlines that, from certain angles, resembled childish drawings of figures with too long limbs and hollow eyes. Detective Renner retired from the police force a year later. In his personal files, sealed away in his attic, he kept copies of Caleb's drawings and a small, smooth stone he'd found at the cave entrance. Sometimes, especially on winter nights when the wind seemed to whisper around his house, he would find himself taking out that stone, turning it over and over in his fingers, wondering about the things children see that adults cannot. In Millridge, parents still warned their children about wandering too close to Blackwood Forest. Teachers at the elementary school no longer assigned certain art projects. and residents who drive past Emma's old house at night sometimes claim they can see, just for a moment, crayon drawings glowing faintly through the windows of the empty pantry, images of hollow-eyed children and a faceless figure with impossibly long arms, reaching out through walls only they can see. Crime 7, 12 steps led straight into concrete, no door, no marking, just solid wall. But the last 3 steps had been worn down as if by heavy use. On the surface of the wall, someone had painted a handle, and just above it, scratched deep into the cement, knock 3 times. When Detective Elaine Mercer first saw the staircase in the basement of 43 Oakwood Lane, she felt an instinctive chill run down her spine. This wasn't in the original blueprints of the Parker residence. The modest 2-story colonial in Millfield, Connecticut, had been built in 1967, and according to county records, had undergone only minor renovations in the kitchen and bathrooms. Nothing that would explain a staircase to nowhere. Rebecca Parker, age 34, had been reported missing on November 8, 2022, by her sister Carolyn after not showing up for their weekly lunch date and failing to answer calls or texts for 3 days. Rebecca lived alone following her divorce 2 years prior. She worked remotely as a graphic designer, which meant her absence wasn't immediately noticed by colleagues. She was quiet but not a loner, Carolyn told Detective Mercer during their first interview. She just needed time to rebuild after the divorce. David, her ex-husband, he took everything from her confidence mostly. Rebecca's life had been structured around gentle routines. Coffee at 7 a.m. on her back porch regardless of weather. Work until 4 p.m. Evening walks through the neighborhood with her phone tracking her steps, always aiming for exactly 5,000. Dinner at 6:30, usually something simple she cooked herself. Weekly lunch with Carolyn on Tuesdays. Monthly book club at the local library. Nothing about Rebecca's life suggested irregularity or risk. Her bank accounts showed predictable spending patterns. No unusual withdrawals, no suspicious contacts on her phone, no concerning search history on her computer. She had few friends, but those she maintained were long-term relationships. The last time we spoke, Carolyn said, eyes fixed on something far away, she mentioned hearing footsteps in the basement at night. I told her it was probably the house settling. Old houses do that, but she said it sounded deliberate. When officers first entered Rebecca's home, everything appeared normal. Bed made, no signs of struggle or forced entry. A half-empty cup of tea sat on the kitchen counter, cold but not moldy, suggesting she had disappeared within the past 2 or 3 days. Her car remained in the garage. Her wallet and keys were on the entryway table. Her phone was never found. It was Officer Luis Ramirez who discovered the basement staircase on the second sweep of the house. The basement itself was finished, a small laundry area, a storage section with neatly labeled boxes, and a modest home office setup with a secondary computer that Rebecca used occasionally. But behind a folding room divider that appeared to simply mark off an unused corner, there was the staircase, 12 steps leading directly into a concrete wall. At first I thought it was some kind of architectural quirk, Officer Ramirez later reported. Like maybe there were plans to expand the basement that never happened, but then I noticed the wear patterns on the steps. The top steps showed normal dust collection, but the bottom 3 were cleaner, as if regularly used. And there was the painted handle, not childish graffiti, but a precise rendering of an antique door handle, painted in silver metallic paint with remarkable detail. The instruction to knock 3 times had been carved with what forensics later determined was likely a house key or similar pointed metal object. When Detective Mercer's team brought in ground-penetrating radar to examine the wall, they found nothing unusual, just solid concrete, approximately 8 inches thick, with normal foundation structure behind it. No cavities, no hidden spaces. Rebecca's ex-husband, David Parker, was questioned extensively. A financial advisor with a spotless reputation, he expressed appropriate concern about his ex-wife's disappearance, but provided a solid alibi for the week in question, a business conference in Chicago with dozens of witnesses and hotel keycard logs confirming his presence. "Did Rebecca ever mention the basement staircase to you?" Detective Mercer asked him. David's face registered genuine confusion. "What staircase? The basement is just one open room as far as I remember." When shown photos, he appeared genuinely perplexed. "That wasn't there when we lived together. The renovation must have happened after I moved out." But there were no records of any construction permits issued for the property since the Parkers had purchased it 7 years earlier. No contractors in the area recalled working on a basement project at that address. The previous owners, tracked down in Arizona, had no recollection of any staircase when they sold the house. 3 weeks into the investigation, with Rebecca still missing and no lights beyond the mysterious staircase, Detective Mercer decided to conduct an overnight observation in the house. She set up in Rebecca's living room with a clear audio feed from microphones placed in the basement. At 2:17 a.m., the recording captured what sounded like footsteps, slow, deliberate, ascending the staircase in the basement. When Mercer reviewed the security footage from cameras aimed at the staircase, there was nothing visible, yet the audio clearly captured the sound of weight on those steps. The forensics team made a curious discovery when analyzing dust samples from the staircase. Mixed with normal household dust were microscopic fibers that didn't match any textiles in Rebecca's home. More disturbing was the discovery of trace amounts of soil that contained pollen from Epipactes helleborine, a non-native orchid species found primarily in certain wooded areas nearly 30 miles from Millfield. When investigators searched Rebecca's secondary computer in the basement, they found a folder labeled simply "Stairs." Inside were dozens of research articles about dimensional physics, theoretical papers on parallel universes, and several personal journal entries. The final entry, dated November 5th, 2022, 3 days before she was reported missing, read, "I've been knocking for weeks now. Tonight someone finally knocked back, 3 times just as instructed. I don't know what's on the other side, but I know she needs help. She sounds just like me." Carolyn identified the writing as definitely her sister's. Rebecca wasn't into science fiction or anything like that, she insisted. She was pragmatic, logical. This doesn't sound like her at all. A deeper dive into Rebecca's main computer revealed that beginning approximately 4 months before her disappearance, she had begun researching local history. Specifically, she had focused on a series of disappearances that had occurred in Millfield in the 1970s. 3 women, all living alone, all vanishing without evidence of foul play. One forum post from Rebecca to an obscure local history group asked, "Has anyone heard about staircases that lead nowhere being connected to the 1973-75 disappearances?" There was no reply to her post. Detective Mercer expanded her investigation to include these cold cases. She discovered that while none of the women had lived in Rebecca's current house, one of them, Marion Wheeler, aged 29, who disappeared in October 1974, had lived only 2 blocks away. Photos from Marion's case file showed a normal home with no unusual architectural features. but a statement from Marion's mother contained an odd detail that hadn't been followed up on. Marion kept talking about hearing someone walking upstairs at night, but her house was a single-story ranch. There were no stairs. As the investigation reached its second month with no sign of Rebecca, community interest began to wane, but Detective Mercer remained fixated on the staircase. She brought in a demolition expert to remove the concrete wall, thinking perhaps it concealed evidence. The demolition was scheduled for February 15, 2023. Detective Mercer, 2 uniformed officers, and the demolition contractor descended into the basement that morning. But when they reached the bottom of the house stairs and turned toward the mysterious staircase, they found only an empty corner. The staircase was gone. No signs of construction, no dust, no indication that anything had ever been there. All photographic evidence from the investigation still clearly showed the staircase. The audio recordings of footsteps remained on file. Multiple officers and forensic technicians had documented its existence, but it was simply gone. Rebecca Parker was never found. Her case remains officially open but inactive. Detective Mercer requested a transfer to another precinct 3 months later and declined to discuss the case further with colleagues. 1 year after Rebecca's disappearance, Carolyn received a postcard with no return address, postmarked from Millfield, though she now lived 2 states away. On the front was a generic forest scene. On the back, in what handwriting experts later confirmed was consistent with Rebecca's, was written, "Don't worry about me. The other side is just like ours, except the staircase leads to a door." Some locals in Millfield now claim that if you listen carefully in certain basements late at night, you can hear knocking, always in sets of 3. But no one dares to knock back. Crime ate hundreds of them dangling on string, stuffed into prescription bottles, hidden in soap boxes, all different shapes and sizes. None matched any lock in the house. Inside one bottle, a note had been tightly rolled and soaked in bleach. The only legible word left was basement. The house on Sycamore Lane belonged to Alina Mercer, a retired pharmacist who had lived in the quiet suburb of Pinewood, Massachusetts, for over 30 years. Alina was known in the neighborhood as the reliable woman who watered her neighbors' plants when they went on vacation, who remembered everyone's birthdays with handwritten cards, and who always kept her porch light on until midnight, just in case someone needed to find their way home in the dark. Alina lived alone since her husband passed away in 2014. Their only daughter, Cassandra, had moved to Seattle after college and visited her mother twice a year. They spoke on the phone every Sunday at 6 p.m. without fail. Alina was organized and precise, habits from her years measuring medications down to the milligram. Her home was modest but immaculate, with everything in its place. Which is why her absence was noticed immediately. It was a Tuesday in late October when Alina failed to appear at her weekly book club. Alina had never missed a meeting in 12 years. When calls to her home and cell phone went unanswered, Diane Parker, her closest friend, drove to the house. Alina's car was in the driveway. The morning newspaper remained rolled in its plastic sleeve by the front door. Diane rang the doorbell, then knocked repeatedly. The house remained silent. "I just knew something was wrong," Diane would later tell detectives. Alina was punctual to a fault, and her kitchen light was on. She was religious about turning lights off when not in the room. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Officer James Harrington noted in his report that there were no signs of forced entry. The house was unlocked, which neighbors confirmed was unusual for Alina. Inside, everything appeared ordinary at first glance. No furniture was overturned, no broken glass, no apparent struggle. Aliner's reading glasses sat on her nightstand beside a half-empty glass of water and a dog-eared copy of The Silent Patient. Her bed was made, hospital corners perfect as always. Her slippers were positioned neatly beside the bed. The closet door was closed. But Aliner was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until Detective Sarah Morrison opened the medicine cabinet in the master bathroom that the first unsettling discovery was made. The medicine cabinet was filled with keys, hundreds of them, meticulously organized in old prescription bottles and soap containers. Some were labeled with dates going back 5 years. Others had strange symbols drawn on the labels. And that bleach-soaked note with just one legible word, basement. The strangest part was that Aliner didn't have a basement, Detective Morrison would later recall. The house was built on a concrete slab. Aliner's phone records showed that her last call was to her daughter Cassandra 3 days earlier, their regular Sunday call. The conversation lasted exactly 43 minutes, which Cassandra confirmed was normal. Aliner had sounded fine, talking about her garden plans for spring and asking about Cassandra's work at the architectural firm. Nothing indicated distress or fear. Aliner's credit card had last been used at Patterson's grocery store the day before she disappeared. Security footage showed her calmly selecting vegetables, greeting the cashier by name, and leaving with 2 small bags of groceries. Those same groceries were found in her refrigerator, untouched. As the investigation continued, officers interviewed neighbors and acquaintances. Most described Aliner as private but warm, meticulous but generous. No one could imagine who would want to harm the retired pharmacist. But as they dug deeper, small inconsistencies in Aliner's life began to emerge. Her former colleague at Willoughby Pharmacy, Thomas Greer, mentioned that Aliner had taken an unexpected leave of absence in 1998. She was gone for almost 3 months. When she came back, she never said where she'd been. She was different after that, more cautious, started checking the locks twice. Aliner's internet search history revealed queries about storage facilities in neighboring counties. Her email contained correspondence with several locksmiths in towns up to 60 miles away, and her bank statements showed monthly withdrawals of $350 in cash, dating back 7 years, with no clear indication of where the money went. The mystery deepened when Detective Morrison discovered a hidden compartment in Aliner's closet. Behind a false panel in the wall was a small safe. Inside, a single photograph of a young man, perhaps in his 20s, with features that resembled Aliner's. On the back, written in faded ink, "Nathan, forgive me." "Who is Nathan?" Morrison asked Cassandra during their third interview. Cassandra's confusion seemed genuine. "I don't know any Nathan. Mom never mentioned that name." Then came the breakthrough, or what seemed like one. A groundskeeper at Hillside Memorial Cemetery reported seeing an elderly woman matching Aliner's description placing flowers at an unmarked grave the day she disappeared. Security cameras confirmed it was Aliner. She spent 45 minutes sitting beside the grave before walking toward the cemetery's east exit. The cameras didn't cover that area. It was the last confirmed sighting of Aliner Mercer. The unmarked grave, when examined, contained the remains of a male infant who died in 1973. The burial records listed the mother as Elizabeth Mason, not Aliner Mercer. Was Elizabeth an alias? The dates aligned. Aliner would have been 22 in 1973. The case took another turn when police tracked down the keys from Aliner's medicine cabinet. Most were for rental storage units across 5 different counties. Over weeks, detectives visited 17 facilities, opening units that contained nothing, empty boxes, old newspapers. In one, a single chair facing the wall. It was like she was playing some kind of game, Officer Harrington noted, or leaving a trail she knew we'd follow. In the 18th storage unit, located in a remote industrial area of Framingham, detectives found a metal desk with a single drawer. Inside was a USB drive containing thousands of pages of chemical formulas and personal journals. The writings revealed that Eleanor, or Elizabeth, as she sometimes referred to herself, had been involved in pharmaceutical research in the early 1970s at a now-defunct laboratory called Meridian Sciences. The journals detailed experiments with memory-altering compounds and described subjects who were willing at first, then less so. One entry stood out. Nathan showed promising results, but the side effects were too severe. They're watching me now. They know I took copies of the data. The basement is the only safe place. The investigation expanded to include the history of Meridian Sciences. Records showed it had been shut down in 1975 after allegations of unethical research practices. Most of the researchers had moved on to legitimate careers. Several were deceased, but one name appeared in both the company records and Eleanor's journals: Dr. Richard Harmon. Dr. Harmon, now 83 and living in a nursing home in Vermont, initially denied knowing Eleanor Mercer. When shown her photograph, his demeanor changed. "Elizabeth," he whispered, "she was brilliant, too brilliant for her own good." According to Harmon, Elizabeth Mason had been a promising researcher who became increasingly paranoid about the company's work. She believed they were developing compounds for military use. She threatened to expose everything, Harmon recalled. Then she just disappeared, took some of our research with her. When asked about Nathan, Harmon grew agitated. There was no Nathan. That was a code name for a project. But the infant grave suggested otherwise. 6 months into the investigation, with Eleanor still missing, Detective Morrison received an anonymous letter. Inside was a single key and a note: Granite Falls Dam, Northeast Service entrance. She's waiting. The Granite Falls Dam, decommissioned in 1989, stood 40 miles from Eleanor's home. The service entrance led to a network of maintenance tunnels beneath the structure. And there, in a small room that had once been a monitoring station, officers found what appeared to be a living space: a cot, a desk with notebooks, canned food, and bottled water. On the desk was a final journal, dated the day of Eleanor's disappearance. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably hers. "I've carried this burden for 50 years, protected my secret, protected Cassandra from knowing, but they've found me again. The people from Meridian never really went away, they just changed names, changed tactics. I've been leaving false trails for years. The keys, the storage units, all decoys. The real evidence is with someone I trust. If anything happens to me, it will find its way to the right people." Nathan was my son. He was also Subject 17. I didn't know what they were doing until it was too late. They said he died from complications. I stole his body from the lab and buried him properly. I took their research and hid it. I've spent my life making sure no one could replicate what they did. I hear them coming now. I won't let them take me. The water is rising behind the dam. The old mechanisms still work if you know how to operate them. I'll open the emergency flood gates at midnight. This place will be underwater by morning. Me with it, the truth with it. Police searched the tunnels thoroughly, but Eleanor's body was never found. Engineers confirmed that someone had attempted to manipulate the floodgate controls, but safety mechanisms had prevented their full operation. Cassandra Mercer was given her mother's journals and the photograph of Nathan. DNA testing confirmed he was her half-brother. The investigation into Meridian Sciences was reopened, but most records had been destroyed decades ago. Several former executives were questioned, but without Aliner's testimony, charges couldn't be filed. Aliner Mercer remains missing to this day. The keys from her medicine cabinet are kept in evidence storage at the Pinewood Police Department. Occasionally, anonymous packages arrive at news outlets or police stations. More keys, more fragmented notes, more pieces to a puzzle that seems impossible to complete. And somewhere, perhaps, a woman who called herself Aliner Mercer is still hiding, still running, still trying to expose a truth buried half a century ago. The porch light at the house on Sycamore Lane stays on until midnight every night. Cassandra makes sure of it, just in case her mother needs to find her way home in the dark. Crime 9, propped upright, perfectly intact. Same make, same color, same number as the one on the actual house. But this one was scratched violently, with deep gouges along the outside. Taped to the back of it was a note that said, "Only she knows which one opens." Sheriff Daniel Mercer stood staring at the duplicate door for what felt like hours. The pale November sun cast long shadows across the overgrown lawn of the Harmon residence in Stillwater County, Montana. The small, unassuming ranch house had belonged to Aliner Harmon, a 68-year-old retired librarian who had lived alone since her husband's death 11 years earlier. Aliner had been reported missing 3 days ago by her niece, Cassandra Wheeler, who lived 2 hours away in Billings. During their weekly Sunday phone call, Aliner had sounded distracted, according to Cassandra. When Aliner failed to answer her phone the following day, Cassandra drove out to check on her aunt, only to find the house locked and Aliner's silver Honda Civic still in the driveway. It wasn't like her to miss our calls, Cassandra had told Sheriff Mercer when she filed the missing person report. She's getting older, but she's sharp as a tack, organized, predictable. Predictable, that was the word that kept repeating in Mercer's mind as he examined the second front door. Aliner Harmon had lived in this house for 43 years. She taught Sunday school at the local Methodist church. She'd organized the library's annual book sale. Nothing about a duplicate door with violent scratch marks made sense for a woman like Aliner. Deputy Collins approached from the house, notepad in hand. No signs of forced entry, Sheriff. Everything inside looks normal. Beds made, dishes washed and put away. The only unusual thing is her purse and keys are still on the kitchen counter. Mercer nodded, eyes still fixed on the door in the shed. Any medications missing. Bathroom cabinet looks fully stocked. Her prescription for blood pressure pills is there. Looks like she took her daily dose the morning she disappeared. What about her phone? Not in the house, not answering when we call it either. The sheriff finally turned away from the shed. Let's expand the search perimeter, and I want a forensics team out here to process this door. Something's not right. Aliner Harmon had moved to Stillwater County with her husband Thomas in 1981. They had no children, but Aliner had been a fixture in the lives of generations of local kids who passed through her library. She was kind but firm, the type of librarian who enforced the rules about quiet but would bend over backward to help a child find just the right book. After Thomas died of a heart attack in 2013, Aliner had withdrawn somewhat but maintained her routines. Monday was grocery shopping. Wednesday was book club. Sunday was church, followed by her call with Cassandra. She never varied from her schedule, Judith reporter, Alina's closest friend from the book club, told Detective Lisa Ramirez 3 days into the investigation. That's why this is so troubling. Alina wouldn't just wander off. Did she ever mention anyone bothering her, any strange encounters? Ramirez asked. Judith hesitated, her fingers worrying the edge of her cardigan. Well, there was something. About 2 months ago, Alina mentioned that she thought someone had been in her house. Did she report this? No, that was the thing. She couldn't be sure. Nothing was missing, but she said things were slightly moved. A glass she knew she'd put in the dishwasher was in the cabinet, books rearranged on her nightstand. She thought maybe she was just getting forgetful. Detective Ramirez made a note. Did she mention anything else unusual recently? Just one thing, Judith said quietly. Last week, she said she'd been finding small scratches on her front door. On the outside, she thought maybe it was neighborhood kids or animals. 6 days after Alina's disappearance, the forensics report came back on the duplicate door. The scratch marks had been made with a variety of implements, knife, screwdriver, possibly keys. More disturbing was the discovery of minute traces of blood in some of the deeper grooves. The blood was being tested for DNA. The note, "Only she knows which one opens," had been typed on plain white paper with a common laser printer. No fingerprints were found on the paper or the tape. Sheriff Mercer sat at his desk, reviewing these findings when his phone rang. "Sheriff, it's Collins. We got a ping from Alina Harmon's phone. It just turned on for the first time since she disappeared." Mercer grabbed his keys. "Where?" "That's the strange part, sir. It's coming from inside her house." The phone was found in Alina's bedroom, plugged into its charger. It hadn't been there during the initial search of the house. More disturbing was what they found on the phone, dozens of photos taken inside Alina's house when she wasn't home. Her empty bed, her coffee cup on the counter, her shoes lined up by the door. The photos dated back 6 months. "Someone was watching her," Ramirez said as they scrolled through the images, entering her home when she was out. "But why return the phone now?" Mercer wondered aloud. The next day brought another development. A locksmith who had serviced homes in the area reported that 3 months earlier, Alina had called him to change her locks. She told him she kept finding her door unlocked, even though she was certain she'd locked it. "I remember because it was unusual," the locksmith, Trevor Dawson, explained. She specifically asked if it was possible for someone to have a key that would work sometimes but not others. I told her no, that's not how locks work. She seemed confused by that. 2 weeks into the investigation, another piece of the puzzle emerged. Cassandra Wheeler was going through her aunt's financial records and discovered something odd: repeated charges to a self-storage facility in Billings. When Cassandra and the detectives visited the facility, they found a unit rented under Alina's name for the past year. Inside was a twin bed, a small table with a lamp, and a mini fridge. On the walls were dozens of printouts of the same photos that had been found on Alina's phone, images of her empty house. On the table was a journal. The journal revealed a side of Alina Harmon that no one had known existed. For over a year, she had documented what she believed were intrusions into her home. Small things moved, the sensation of someone watching her, the feeling that someone had been in her bed. "I know I'm not imagining this," she had written 3 months before her disappearance. "I've started marking the position of things before I leave. They move. Someone is trying to make me think I'm losing my mind." The final entry was dated the day before she disappeared. I found another scratch on my door today. They're getting deeper. I'm going to confront whoever is doing this. I've set up a camera. But there was no camera found in Aliner's house. 23 days after Aliner Harmon disappeared, a hiking couple found a silver Honda Civic parked at a trailhead in the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness, about 40 miles from Aliner's home. The car was locked with no signs of struggle. Aliner's jacket was folded neatly on the passenger seat. A search of the surrounding wilderness yielded nothing. No body, no clues, just miles of dense forest and rugged terrain. Then came the break they'd been waiting for. The DNA results from the blood traces on the duplicate door came back. The blood belonged to two individuals, Aliner Harmon and Thomas Harmon, her husband who had supposedly died 11 years earlier. Sheriff Mercer sat across from Cassandra Wheeler in the station's small conference room. "Ms. Wheeler, we need to talk about your Uncle Thomas." Cassandra looked confused. "What about him? He died in 2013. "Did you attend his funeral?" "No, I was living in Europe then. Aunt Aliner sent me photos of the service." "Did you ever see his body?" "I don't understand what you're asking." Mercer slid a folder across the table. Thomas Harmon's death certificate was signed by a doctor who lost his license 3 months later for falsifying medical documents. We've also discovered that your uncle had taken out a substantial life insurance policy just 6 months before his supposed death. Cassandra's face paled. "Are you saying Uncle Thomas faked his death? That's impossible. Aunt Aliner would never." "We don't believe your aunt was involved in the deception initially," Ramirez interjected, "but we think she discovered the truth recently. The storage unit, the documentation of intrusions, the duplicate door, we believe Thomas has been living a double life, periodically returning to the house when Aliner was out," Mercer continued. "Something changed. Either she confronted him, or he decided it was time to make her disappear. The case of Aliner Harmon remains officially unsolved. Despite extensive searches, her body has never been found. Thomas Harmon, if he is indeed alive, has vanished as completely as his wife. The duplicate front door sits in an evidence locker at the Stillwater County Sheriff's Department. Its scratches tell a story that investigators can only piece together from fragments, of a woman who began to doubt her own sanity, who discovered a terrible betrayal, and who may have finally confronted the ghost who had been haunting her home. The note remains the most chilling piece of evidence. Only she knows which one opens. Some investigators believe it refers to Aliner knowing which door led to safety and which to danger. Others interpret it more literally, that Aliner knew which of the identical doors actually fit her house. Either way, both doors remain closed, and the truth about what happened to Aliner Harmon remains locked behind them. Story 10: The Hidden Observer. The realtor's listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints held no clue to its existence. Yet, as the family uncovered the secret beneath the old carpet, they discovered a concealed door. A heavy, rusted handle resisted their efforts until finally, with the combined strength of 3, they pried it open. Stale air, thick with the scent of damp earth, greeted them as they descended the steps into darkness. Anticipating storage space, they instead found a solitary chair illuminated by a swaying light bulb, and on the wall behind it, a collection of photographs of them. The Mercer family had settled into the suburban dwelling during the stark winter months, enveloped by early darkness and skeletal trees. The aged 2-story house, with its weathered siding and creaking floors, exuded character and a sense of history. Little did they know how deeply intertwined that history would become with their own lives. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the scene with her partner, the crime unit already at work securing the area with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's shaken voice had relayed the shocking discovery beneath their living room floor. "We must document everything before further exploration," Connors directed, donning latex gloves with practiced efficiency. The camera flashes illuminated the stairwell as the forensic team meticulously captured the eerie scene. The wooden steps groaned under their weight, leading to a small basement resembling a standard bedroom, its concrete walls painted a dull gray. In the center stood a chair, bolted to the floor, beneath a harshly lit bulb casting eerie shadows. However, it was the row of photographs that seized their attention, 37 images arranged in chronological order. "These date back weeks," noted Connor's partner, observing timestamps on the prints. The investigation yielded no signs of forced entry, no theft, just a profound invasion of privacy. Forensics uncovered fingerprints belonging to previous homeowners scattered throughout the basement. The house's unsettling history emerged as they delved further, each family staying briefly before selling at discounted prices. None had divulged the existence of a basement. Connors directed the team to interview all past owners, unearthing disturbing inconsistencies in the property records. A breakthrough came when they consulted the contractor who had renovated the house years earlier. His denial of the basement's existence fueled the mystery. Digital forensics extracted more incriminating evidence, revealing a hidden monitoring station with cameras and a journal detailing intimate observations of each family. The journal's final entries hinted at a chilling reality. Edward Kelvin, the house's builder, had never left. He had ensconced himself within the walls, watching, studying, and recording the family's every move. The manhunt concluded with Kelvin's discovery curled within a crawlspace, his delusions unraveling as he spoke of the families as his own. The trial exposed Kelvin's elaborate surveillance network, designed from the house's inception to observe its residents covertly. As the jury reached their verdict, Kelvin remained detached, lost in his delusions. The property was razed, but the families haunted by the violation continued to wonder if they had ever been truly alone in their supposed sanctuary. They could not shake the feeling that unseen eyes had watched, unheard ears had listened, and that the shadows within the walls concealed secrets beyond their comprehension. Story 11. It arrived in the mail, wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address. A single brass key worn with time. The homeowner didn't recognize it, but something about it felt familiar. When she slid it into every lock she owned, nothing turned. It wasn't hers. But when she placed it on the coffee table, the old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, hollow chime despite having been broken for years. Sarah Miller reported the strange occurrence to authorities after finding the mysterious key. What seemed like an odd mishap soon unraveled into one of the most disturbing criminal investigations the quiet suburban neighborhood had ever witnessed. The responding officer initially dismissed her concerns. A key in the mail, perhaps a mistake, he suggested. But Sarah insisted something felt wrong. The officer reluctantly took the key as evidence, mostly to appease her, placing it in a small evidence bag that would later become central to a sprawling investigation. Detective Robert Harmon received the case filed during the morning briefing. A veteran investigator with the Special Victims Unit, he had developed an intuition for cases that would evolve beyond their seemingly innocuous beginnings. The brass key sat on his desk, unremarkable yet somehow unsettling. Background checks revealed Sarah had no criminal history. A retired high school English teacher, widowed, with 2 adult children living across the country. Nothing suspicious in her financial records, phone logs, or social media. She appeared to be exactly what she claimed, an innocent recipient of something strange. The forensic team found no fingerprints on the key besides Sarah's. The envelope yielded nothing except a generic postmark from the regional distribution center. No DNA, no trace evidence. The key itself was a standard Schlage, available at any hardware store, though well-worn and at least several years old. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique bidding pattern through the department database. A cold case from 7 years prior had documented an identical key pattern belonging to a storage unit where investigators had found blood-stained carpet, cutting tools, and photographs of unidentified women. The original investigation had stalled without sufficient evidence to identify a suspect. Harmon pulled the dusty case files. The detective who had worked the case had since retired. The storage unit had been rented under a false identity, paid in cash. Surveillance footage had long been overwritten. The evidence collected had yielded partial DNA samples, but no matches in any criminal database. The photographs recovered from the storage unit showed 5 different women, all appearing unconscious. Only 3 had been identified during the original investigation, all reported missing, but never found. Their cases remained open, classified as suspected homicides without bodies. Sarah Miller recognized none of the women when shown the photographs. She grew increasingly anxious as the investigation proceeded, installing new locks and a security system in her home. The question lingered, why had someone sent her this key? Harmon ordered a fresh analysis of the original evidence using newer techniques. The partial DNA sample was expanded and run through genealogical databases. This yielded a distant familial match, a second cousin twice removed from the suspect. Working backward through family trees, investigators narrowed their focus to Harold Jenkins, who had lived 2 streets away from Sarah Miller until moving away approximately 6 years ago. His current whereabouts were unknown. Further investigation revealed Jenkins had been a substitute teacher at the same school where Sarah taught, though they had minimal documented interaction. His employment records showed scattered work history, long unexplained gaps, and frequent relocations. His former residence yielded nothing unusual upon inspection. Neighbors described him as quiet, unremarkable, someone who kept to himself, the common refrain that often follows revelations about predators hiding in plain sight. The big question remained unanswered: why send the key now? Why to Sarah Miller? Harmon theorized it might be a trophy, a warning, or perhaps a macabre invitation. The search for Jenkins intensified. His driver's license hadn't been renewed, no credit card activity, no tax returns. The digital breadcrumbs people typically leave behind were conspicuously absent, suggesting an intentional effort to remain untraceable. The true horror of the case emerged when authorities investigated a small cabin registered to Jenkins' deceased mother. Beneath the weathered wooden floorboards, investigators discovered a concealed room accessible only through a trapdoor. Inside, meticulously organized shelves held dozens of identical brass keys, each with a name and date engraved on a small attached tag. 5 keys corresponded to the women from the photographs. The remaining keys, 27 in total, presented a horrifying implication of additional victims previously unknown to authorities. Buried behind the cabin, forensic teams recovered human remains. The excavation continued for weeks as investigators unearthed multiple bodies in varying states of decomposition. Sarah received round-the-clock protection as the manhunt for Jenkins expanded nationwide. Behavioral analysts suggested the key represented a twisted invitation, Jenkins selecting Sarah as someone to appreciate his work. The press dubbed him the Keymaster, a name that spread rapidly across national headlines. Fear permeated the community as residents questioned how such horror had existed among them undetected. Detection dogs tracked a scent from the cabin into the surrounding wilderness. Search teams combed dense forest areas. Thermal imaging drones scanned terrain too dangerous for ground teams. The manhunt became one of the largest in regional history. A wildlife photographer hiking in remote woods captured an image of someone matching Jenkins' description. The grainy photograph showed a bearded man with hollow eyes carrying a backpack, heading deeper into the wilderness. Authorities closed in on the area, establishing a perimeter. Tactical teams navigated difficult terrain while psychological profilers predicted Jenkins would not surrender. They anticipated he might have prepared for this contingency with hidden supplies and escape routes. The final confrontation occurred when a patrol officer encountered Jenkins attempting to cross a river. Rather than surrender, Jenkins retreated to higher ground, where he barricaded himself in an abandoned fire observation tower. Negotiators attempted communication for hours without response. When tactical teams finally breached the tower, they found Jenkins dead from a self-inflicted wound. Beside his body lay a journal containing detailed accounts of his crimes, alongside a single brass key identical to the one Sarah had received. Inside a waterproof container, investigators discovered additional evidence, including photographs, maps marking burial locations, and personal effects taken from victims, a methodically preserved record of atrocities spanning nearly a decade. The journal's final entry addressed Sarah directly. "You never noticed me, but I noticed everything about you. The key opens nothing because what I wanted to give you cannot be unlocked with metal, only with recognition. Now everyone will remember my name." The subsequent investigation identified 32 victims in total. Families who had spent years wondering about missing loved ones finally received answers, though the closure came with the unbearable weight of confirmed tragedy. Sarah never returned to her home, unable to reconcile the horror that had brushed so close to her ordinary life. The grandfather clock that had mysteriously chimed was examined and found to contain a small wireless receiver Jenkins had been watching, waiting for the moment she received his gift. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of predatory behavior hiding beneath a veneer of normalcy. Psychological researchers continue studying Jenkins' writings, seeking insights to identify similar offenders before they act. And somewhere in an evidence locker, a collection of brass keys sits in silent testimony to lives cut short, each key opening nothing, yet unlocking a devastating truth about the darkness that sometimes hides behind unremarkable facades. Story 12. Amidst the stillness of the night, the new homeowners noticed a peculiar anomaly in their old Victorian manor, an intercom system crackling with static, a whisper lingering in the air when all should have been silent. It was a relic of the past, a forgotten connection to a time long gone, yet its presence felt unsettlingly present in the darkness. The husband's curiosity led him to press the button one fateful night, and a voice, faint yet distinct, whispered through the crackling speaker, "Why did you come back?" His hands trembled, his heart quickened, as his wife, standing behind him, denied ever speaking those words. Daniel and Meredith Parker had been drawn to the charm of the manor, nestled among ancient oaks, its exterior weathered by time but its interior modernized and inviting. Despite the reasonable price, there was an underlying unease that the real estate agent couldn't quite conceal during the walkthrough. The vintage intercom system, connecting all rooms with its historic allure, had been a selling point for the couple, history enthusiasts at heart. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the property in her unmarked vehicle, the gravel whispering beneath the tires as she sensed there was more to the reported break-in than met the eye. Daniel, with a haunted look, welcomed her, leading her through the grand foyer to unravel the mystery that had taken root within the walls of their new home. The intercom, once a mere conduit for static, had transformed into a channel for whispers and secrets long buried. In the dimly lit living room, Meredith clutched a steaming mug, her gaze fixed on an unseen horizon as she revealed the discovery behind a wall an old journal belonging to Alina, the previous owner, its pages a testament to her fear of a husband's sinister intentions. The truth of Alina's fate, hidden for decades, began to unfurl as the past seeped into the present. The investigation unveiled a tale of betrayal and tragedy, of a woman silenced by violence and deception. Alina's remains, buried beneath the garden shed, bore witness to a crime that had remained concealed for far too long. Vincent Blackwood, the aging culprit living out his days in a care facility, confessed to the murder with a chilling calmness that sent shivers down Detective Reeves' spine. Vincent's carefully woven web of lies unraveled in the face of irrefutable evidence, his confession painting a portrait of a man consumed by silence, haunted by the echo of his victim's voice through the intercom. The trial concluded swiftly, with Vincent admitting his guilt and the judge acknowledging the cold calculation behind his actions. Daniel and Meredith, unable to bear the weight of the house's dark past, bid farewell to the manor, holding a solemn memorial for Alina in the restored garden, a final gesture of closure. The intercom, a conduit for the echoes of the past, was dismantled by the new owners, its whispers fading into the shadows of memory. Detective Reeves, closing the chapter on the Blackwood case, pondered the house's silent vigil, its walls holding secrets that had finally come to light. As she drove past the property, a faint breeze carrying whispers of the past, she understood that some mysteries linger beyond the confines of time, waiting to be heard by those who dare to listen. Story 13. The dwelling had sat untouched for what felt like an eternity. Whispers from the neighbors spoke of its vacancy since the mysterious disappearance of a young woman. And yet, as the new residents crossed the threshold, they encountered a bedroom shrouded in secrecy, its door stubbornly sealed shut. With determined effort, they forced entry, greeted by a heavy stillness, a silence pregnant with unanswered questions. The atmosphere within was stagnant, carrying the weight of neglect and time. But amidst the dust and shadows, a peculiar sense of unease lingered. The bed stood immaculately made, the mirror devoid of blemish. A solitary candle, a mere remnant of its former self, had left behind a trail of hardened tears in the form of melted wax. A notebook lay open on the desk, its pages adorned with fresh ink that seemed to glisten in the dim light. Detective Morgan carefully perused the entries within, while forensic specialists meticulously combed the room for traces of the past. The handwriting belonged to Elise Winters, a woman of 26 who had vanished without a trace half a decade ago. Her words danced across the paper with precision and grace until they reached a final entry, a chilling revelation etched into the page. "I know he's watching me tonight," the inked confession declared. "The same vehicle has circled thrice. My pleas for aid fall on deaf ears. Should the worst come to pass, know that it was no mere coincidence." As Detective Morgan closed the book, sealing away its secrets, a faint scent hung in the air, a blend of dust and an elusive chemical undertone. The landlord, a spectral figure in the doorway, bore a countenance drained of color. "We scoured every inch before offering it for lease," he murmured, disbelief tainting his words. "That door should not have been locked." Elise, a paralegal at the esteemed firm of Harriman and Associates, had unraveled a web of deceit in the days leading up to her disappearance. Her colleagues painted a portrait of a meticulous and devoted soul, whose once unwavering resolve had begun to waver in the face of unsettling revelations. The photographs of Elise revealed a woman of poise and intellect, her auburn locks framing eyes that harbored a depth of knowledge. Her sudden vanishing defied reason, leaving behind a room frozen in time, untouched by chaos or violence, a silent witness to a mystery unsolved. In the quest for answers, the investigators delved deeper, scouring every nook and cranny for hidden truths. Behind a loose floorboard near the closet, a concealed treasure awaited a waterproof case safeguarding a key and a flash drive, a key that unlocked a vault of damning revelations. The documents unearthed exposed a tangled web of deceit, weaving a narrative of corporate malfeasance and betrayal. Elise's unwavering pursuit of truth had unraveled a sinister plot, one that had cost lives in the name of greed and power. As the shadows of justice lengthened, the figure of Vincent Harriman emerged from the darkness, his once unassailable faade crumbling under the weight of irrefutable evidence. The hidden passage, the sealed secrets, it all pointed to a man consumed by his own hubris, his crimes laid bare for the world to see. In the hallowed halls of justice, Elise's voice echoed through the silence, a beacon of truth in a world shrouded in lies. Her legacy, though marred by tragedy, stood as a testament to the power of one woman's unyielding pursuit of justice. The house, a silent witness to untold horrors, stood abandoned once more, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past. And in the stillness of the night, a faint light flickered in the upper window, a ghostly reminder of a soul that had refused to be silenced, even in death. As the darkness enveloped the house in its velvety embrace, the truth remained an indelible mark etched into the very fabric of the room where Elise Winters had made her final stand against the forces of corruption. Justice, though delayed, had finally come to claim its own. Story 14. The old Polaroid held secrets within its faded hues, a snapshot frozen in time from a birthday long past. Familiar faces smiled, candles flickered innocently, nothing out of the ordinary at first glance. But when the daughter inherited the box of forgotten memories, a chilling discovery awaited her. Among the joyful scenes of yesteryear, a figure lurked in the shadows, standing just beyond the reach of the candlelight. A man unknown to the family, yet present in every photo, drawing closer with each frame. Sarah Winters stumbled upon the unsettling collection while sifting through her late mother's attic, labeled simply as memories. What should have been a nostalgic journey through happier times soon turned into a descent into the unknown. The first photo revealed a faint silhouette at the periphery, a mysterious onlooker during a childhood birthday celebration. Subsequent snapshots unveiled his gradual advance, moving from the edge of the frame to the heart of the gathering, unnoticed by all but the lens of the camera. Alarmed, Sarah reached out to her father, seeking answers to the enigmatic presence haunting the cherished photographs. His bewildered response only deepened the mystery, as he denied any recollection of a stranger amidst the family gatherings. Desperate for clarity, Sarah turned to Detective Marcus Reed, a seasoned investigator whose keen eye and unwavering resolve were her last hope in unraveling the eerie puzzle. In the dimly lit confines of the precinct, rain tapping against the windows like a whispered secret, Sarah laid out the evidence before Detective Reed. His scrutiny was methodical, his expression unreadable as he traced the phantom figure's progression through the photos. Each image painted a chilling portrait of a presence unseen yet undeniably real, inching closer to the unsuspecting children captured in frozen time. As the investigation unfolded, the truth veiled in shadows began to take shape. The figure in the photos, a ghostly specter haunting the past, bore a resemblance to a long-missing maintenance worker named Robert Keller. Linked to cold cases of child abductions that plagued the region decades ago, Keller's sinister trail led back to the very gatherings immortalized in Sarah's family albums. With painstaking detail, forensic analysis unearthed hidden clues within the photos, revealing a macabre connection to Keller's dark past. Dental records provided a chilling confirmation, tying the elusive figure to a string of unsolved disappearances that had cast a shadow over the community for years. The revelation sent shivers down Sarah's spine as the phantom in the photographs transformed from a mere specter into a sinister force of malevolence. Piecing together the fragments of a long-buried nightmare, Sarah confronted the harrowing truth that had lurked unseen in the background of her childhood memories. The figure in the photos, once a spectral enigma, now stood exposed as a predator who had preyed on innocence, leaving behind only echoes of unspeakable horror. As the pieces of the chilling puzzle fell into place, justice finally caught up with the shadow that had haunted generations. Families found closure, though tinged with sorrow, as the hidden figure in the family photos emerged from the shadows of secrecy to face the light of accountability. Sarah, alone in her contemplation, pondered the fragile veil between past and present, where unseen threats lurked beneath the surface of captured moments, waiting to be revealed in the unforgiving light of truth. Story 15. The ancient box lay hidden beneath layers of forgotten clutter in the attic, a relic left behind by the house's former inhabitants. Among the faded Polaroids of joyful occasions, one photograph stood out to Rebecca. It depicted a family in her living room, the familiar setting tainted by the presence of a mysterious figure lurking in the shadows. A shiver ran down her spine as she examined the image, her hands trembling slightly, causing the edges of the picture to quiver. Descending the creaking wooden stairs, Rebecca carried the unsettling photo to the stark light of her kitchen. The eerie resemblance between her home and the strangers captured in the picture was uncanny. Detective Morgan, a seasoned investigator with piercing eyes, arrived to delve into the enigma. He studied the photograph, searching for clues, and inquired about the previous owners, the Nelsons, who had sold her the house without leaving a trace. The investigation unfolded quietly, unveiling a pattern of families disappearing after precisely 1 year of residence in Rebecca's home. Each family had vanished without a trace, leaving behind no clues to their sudden departure. The Polaroid, dated 15 years prior, hinted at a chilling truth: the families were being watched by a shadowy figure whose identity remained a mystery. Forensic analysis revealed disturbing details about the figure in the photograph, resembling a man in dark clothing standing motionless in the hallway. As the investigation progressed, a connection emerged to Samuel Whitfield, the elusive architect of the house who had met a tragic end. Beneath the concrete floor of the basement, a grim discovery awaited: the preserved remains of all the missing families, alongside a camera that had captured their final moments. The house transformed into a haunting crime scene, its secrets slowly coming to light. A hidden crawlspace in the attic unveiled a chilling diary detailing the watcher's sinister intentions towards Rebecca. Fearing for her safety, Rebecca sought refuge in a hotel under police protection, only to be tormented by mysterious calls in the dead of night, signaling an ominous presence still lurking in the shadows. To this day, the truth remains elusive, with Samuel Whitfield's fate shrouded in mystery. Some believe he perished long ago, while others speculate he continues his macabre activities elsewhere. The house stands empty, a silent witness to unspeakable horrors, where new families may unknowingly become his next victims. The chilling tale of the man in the photograph endures, a dark reminder that some mysteries are best left undisturbed. Story 16. The tale of the Victorian-era home unfolded like a dream wrapped in a mystery. Michael and Sarah Klein, the new owners, stumbled upon a secret hidden beneath the peeling wallpaper that whispered of a chilling past. The house, with its towering ceilings and intricate woodwork, beckoned them with promises of stories untold. But it was the water stain in the master bedroom that sparked the unraveling of a forgotten tale, a stain that led to layers upon layers of history, each more haunting than the last. As they delicately peeled back the wallpaper, a name emerged: Eleanor Winters, scrawled in ink as if pleading to be remembered. Who was she, this elusive Eleanor, whose name danced across the walls in a frenzy of desperation? Their search for answers led them down a rabbit hole of intrigue. Margaret Cavendish, the elegant woman who sold them the house, bore an uncanny resemblance to the missing Eleanor. A missing persons case from decades past linked the two women in a web of secrets and shadows. With each revelation, the house seemed to exhale a sigh of forgotten memories, urging Michael and Sarah to uncover the truth buried within its walls. They delved into old records, traced fading clues, and unearthed a connection that defied logic and reason. Eleanor Winters, a phantom from the past, haunted their every thought. Her disappearance, shrouded in mystery, left a void that echoed through the years. And Margaret Cavendish, a ghost in her own right, held the key to a puzzle that spanned decades. The discovery of hidden identities beneath the floorboards added another layer to the enigma. Eleanor and Margaret, intertwined in a dance of deception and deceit, blurred the lines between reality and illusion. But it was the revelation of Rebecca Eldridge, a troubled soul lost in the labyrinth of her own mind, that unveiled the darkest truth of all. A fractured psyche, a desperate attempt to hold onto fragments of self, had painted the walls with names that spoke of a tragedy long buried. The excavation of the backyard unearthed long-buried secrets, bringing the past crashing into the present with relentless force. Eleanor Winters, finally found but forever lost, became a symbol of justice delayed but not denied. And as the truth unfurled like a tapestry of shadows, Michael and Sarah stood witness to a story that transcended time and space. The house, once a sanctuary, now bore witness to a crime that echoed through the ages. In the end, the walls themselves became the storytellers, whispering of a past that refused to be forgotten. And as the night descended, casting its cloak of darkness over the world, the house settled into a slumber, cradling its secrets like a lullaby of the forgotten. Story 17. In the stillness of the night, a pocket dial echoed through the darkness, a mere whisper of static and muffled sounds that almost went unnoticed by the operator. But then a voice emerged from the abyss, cutting through the void like a sharp blade. It was a woman, her words dripping with urgency and fear. "He's here." And then silence enveloped the line like a shroud, leaving behind only a chilling emptiness. The number traced back to an old, abandoned house, its walls holding secrets of the past within their decaying embrace. No signs of forced entry marred the entrance, no disturbances disrupted the stagnant air. Yet in the forgotten kitchen, a phone lay upon the counter, its screen softly aglow, as if beckoning from another realm. The call had been made mere minutes ago, a ghostly echo of the past reaching out from the shadows. Detective Morgan Reed found herself captivated by the haunting playback, the whispered words lingering in the air like an unanswered question. The abandoned property belonged to the Sullivan family, who had fled after a devastating fire ravaged the west wing of their home. Since then, the house had stood as a silent sentinel, untouched by the passage of time. A background check revealed that the number belonged to Catherine Sullivan, the daughter of the former residents, who had tragically perished in a car accident 3 years prior. The phone in the evidence bag seemed to defy logic, a relic of the deceased, making calls from a place long forgotten by the living. The forensic team scoured the scene, searching for clues in the dust-covered corners of the abandoned house. But their efforts yielded no fingerprints, no footprints, no tangible evidence of human presence. It was as if the phone had materialized out of thin air, a spectral link to a world beyond comprehension. The recording, those fleeting 11 seconds of static and desperation, became the focal point of their investigation. Voice analysis confirmed the identity of the caller as Catherine Sullivan, with an eerie 98% certainty. The timestamp of the call coincided with the exact moment of her untimely demise, a chilling coincidence that defied rational explanation. Morgan and her partner, Detective Walsh, delved into Catherine's past, questioning those who had known her in life. Her family, her friends, her former boyfriend, Mark Jennings, all were scrutinized under the cold light of suspicion. But the truth remained elusive, slipping through their fingers like sand in the wind. It wasn't until Catherine's mother made a startling discovery, a journal hidden among her daughter's belongings, that the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The journal bore witness to a relationship marred by control and fear, a descent into darkness that culminated in a desperate plea for help. Confronted with the damning evidence, Mark Jennings's facade crumbled, revealing a darkness lurking beneath the surface. His alibi crumbled under scrutiny, his lies unraveling like a tapestry of deceit. And when the buried phone was unearthed, its secrets laid bare, the truth could no longer be denied. The journal, the buried phone, the whispers of the past, they all converged to paint a portrait of a man consumed by jealousy and rage, a man willing to silence the voice of his victim by any means necessary. Mark's twisted game of deception had come to an end, his web of lies unraveled by the relentless pursuit of justice. As the courtroom braced for the final verdict, Catherine's mother clutched the journal to her chest, a silent witness to the triumph of truth over darkness. Mark Jennings was found guilty of first-degree murder, his reign of terror brought to a decisive end by the unwavering determination of those who sought justice for the voiceless. And so, the phone from the abandoned house now rests in the evidence locker, a silent sentinel of the past. Its phantom ring echoes through the halls of memory, a reminder that even in death, the voice of the silenced will find a way to speak a haunting testament to the enduring power of truth and justice. Story 18. The cafe had been his sanctuary for endless mornings, same spot, same brew, same tranquil solitude. The barista recognized his face, yet his identity remained a mystery to all. Then one day he failed to appear. When authorities investigated his usual haunt, they stumbled upon a forgotten wallet. Inside lay a driver's license with a face but no name, no address, just an empty void where his identity should have resided. Upon scrutinizing the surveillance footage, Detective Sarah Mercer found something inexplicable. The enigma, now dubbed John Doe in official records, seemed ordinary on screen. Of average stature with unassuming features, clad in a navy overcoat and toting a weathered leather satchel. He blended in seamlessly, heightening the eerie aura of his vanishing act. Pressing her fingertips against the icy metal table, Mercer replayed the footage alongside the tech specialist. John entered the cafe during the bustling morning rush, ordered his usual pitch-black coffee, and settled at the secluded table obscured by a leafy plant. Scribbling in a notebook, he occasionally glanced out the window, sipping his coffee. Then the pivotal moment arrived. He placed his wallet down, rose, and headed towards the restroom corridor. Yet he never returned to his seat. He never emerged through any exit. He simply evaporated into thin air. "Examine the restroom footage," Mercer directed. "Here's the bizarre part," the specialist replied. "He never set foot in any restroom. We've combed through every camera angle. It's as though he dissolved into the ether." Back at headquarters, Mercer scattered the wallet's contents across her desk. The driver's license image mirrored their enigmatic visitor, yet where personal details should have been, only blank spaces gaped back. Credit cards devoid of names, only strings of digits that led nowhere in the system. Neatly stacked cash of various denominations, a coffee shop receipt dated 3 days prior, and a solitary business card blank on both sides except for a faintly printed phone number in gray ink. Dialing the number, Mercer encountered silence on the line. Faint rustling akin to pages turning filled the void before the call abruptly cut off. The seasoned barista who had served John for years provided scant insight. He was a man of few words, always courteous though generous tipper. Might have had an accent, but his voice was so hushed it was hard to discern. "Did he engage with anyone here, hold conversations?" Mercer inquired. Never, always solo, engrossed in that notepad. The notebook lingered on the table beside the forsaken wallet, its pages a mosaic of cryptic symbols and coded text. Department cryptographers toiled to decipher its enigma. Some sheets featured intricate sketches, blueprints of unfamiliar edifices that defied local architecture. Mercer dispatched officers to canvass the vicinity with John Doe's portraits, yet no one recognized him. No missing persons dossier matched his description. His fingerprints eluded all databases. It was as though he was a specter confined to that humble cafe. During her inquiries, Mercer detected an anomaly in the footage. Each morning upon John's entry, the camera's timestamp flickered fleetingly. The tech expert dismissed it as a glitch, but Mercer harbored doubts. Returning to the cafe, she assumed his spot. From there, she could oversee both the entrance and the restroom corridor. Suspended between them hung an antique mirror, its frame ornately etched with symbols akin to those in John's notebook. Upon the owner's arrival, Mercer probed about the mirror's origins. "That old thing predates my tenure, came with the building. A hefty relic requires 2 to shift it. Has it ever been relocated for maintenance or refurbishment? Never in my time. Why do you ask?" Approaching the mirror, Mercer scrutinized her reflection. A subtle distortion lent her mirrored image an uncanny depth. Anticipating cool glass, she touched its surface, only to encounter an anomalous warmth. Forensics personnel inspected the mirror, revealing a concealed compartment behind it. Nested within were a series of identical wallets, each housing a faceless driver's license. Beside them lay a leather-bound journal brimming with entries spanning decades, inscribed in the same hand as the abandoned notebook. The final entry ominously declared, "The experiment must cease. They draw near. The aperture is closing." Investigators unearthed John Doe's fingerprints throughout the hidden cache. Carbon dating suggested the oldest wallet dated back 50 years, yet the countenance in the photo remained ageless. Journal entries chronicled experiments in temporal displacement and identity transference, referencing crossing back and window points. One passage ensnared Mercer's attention. The cafe serves as a nexus, a juncture where realities converge. The mirror acts as the portal. When alignment aligns, transit becomes viable. As the investigation deepened, peculiar occurrences unfurled around the cafe. Patrons reported witnessing autonomous movements in their reflected images on the window glass. Some swore they glimpsed John Doe seated at his customary table, though surveillance reels depicted emptiness. A breakthrough surfaced when an elderly woman reached out to the precinct regarding the inquiry. Margaret Keller, a former physicist privy to classified projects, identified John Doe as Daniel Weston. He was a brilliant mind in theoretical physics, vanishing amid experiments involving quantum mirror surfaces with the potential to facilitate interreality material transference, she disclosed. Documentation indicated Weston vanished following a laboratory mishap, aligning with the earliest journal entry discovered behind the mirror. He posited our realm as one among myriad coexisting planes, Keller elaborated. He theorized that specific locales acted as frail junctures between these realms, points where one could traverse. Armed with this revelation, Mercer revisited the CAF. The structure, she learned, overlaid the grounds of the former research facility where Weston conducted his enigmatic studies. The CAF was erected directly atop the laboratory where he vanished. The inquiry crescendoed when, scrutinizing the surveillance footage solo one late eve, Mercer discerned an oversight in previous viewings. Reflected in the mirror's backdrop, she spied John Doe Daniel Weston observing himself seated at the table. Two iterations of the same man coexisting concurrently. Hastening to the CAF to inspect the mirror anew, Mercer encountered its shattered remains on the floor. Amid the shards lay a final missive scribed in the familiar hand. The experiment concludes. The portal seals shut. Do not pursue. The enigma of the non-existent man remains an enigma to this day. The CAF shuttered shortly after the inquiry. The edifice eventually razed. Daniel Weston's remains were never unearthed. His journals and notebooks vanished from the precinct under baffling circumstances. Mercer, in due course, resigned from the force. Locals occasionally glimpse her scribbling fervently in a notebook akin to Weston's on her porch. Adorning her wall hangs a fragment of an antique mirror, its surface intermittently rippling when unobserved. Story 19. The mysterious package arrived unannounced, devoid of any traceable information. No return label, no tracking number, just a damp cardboard box touched by the morning dew. Sarah Miller, the unintended recipient, hesitated at the sight. The address was correct, but the name, Daniel Whitaker, did not ring a bell. Common sense urged her to ignore it, to leave it untouched on the porch. Yet curiosity beckoned, pulling her towards the unknown. With cautious hands, she peeled back the tape, anticipating mundane contents like books or clothes. However, what lay inside was far from ordinary, a VHS tape accompanied by a solitary sticky note that simply read, "Watch alone." Intrigued, Sarah held the black plastic tape in her hands, sensing an inexplicable weight to it, as if it carried secrets too heavy to bear. Running her fingers along its worn edges, she noticed the imperfections etched into the casing. The handwritten note bore the marks of urgency, each stroke pressed firmly into the paper. As she stood in her kitchen, the backdrop of suburban life humming around her, Sarah felt a sense of detachment from the world outside. A dog barked in the distance, children's laughter drifted through the air, and the rhythmic hum of a lawnmower provided a backdrop to the unfolding mystery within her home. Against her better judgment, Sarah inserted the tape into her old VCR. Static crackled on the screen before gradually sharpening into a dimly lit room. The camera angle was askew, casting shadows across a man seated in a wooden chair. His voice, steady yet hushed, identified him as Daniel Whitaker. His weary appearance hinted at sleepless nights and looming danger as he began to recount a story of betrayal and deceit. Daniel's words painted a picture of innocence tainted by false evidence, of a life upended by a crime he did not commit. He spoke of Catherine Walsh's murder, of being framed for a crime he had no part in. The room around him spoke of transience, of a life lived on the run, always one step ahead of an unseen threat. Sarah watched, captivated by the unfolding drama, as Daniel's plea for understanding echoed through the silent room. Meanwhile, Detective Eliza Ramirez found herself entangled in a web of deception as more tapes surfaced, each revealing a piece of the puzzle. The case of Catherine Walsh's murder took a dark turn as hidden truths began to emerge. A pharmaceutical company, PharmaCorp, stood at the center of it all, its sinister secrets threatening to unravel the fabric of justice. As Ramirez delved deeper, she uncovered a whistleblower's tale, a story of corporate greed and deadly cover-ups. Sarah Miller's involvement deepened with the arrival of a second package, filled with damning evidence against PharmaCorp. The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place as Daniel Whitaker's narrative gained credibility. Together with Ramirez, they followed the breadcrumbs left by Whitaker, uncovering a conspiracy of epic proportions. In a storage unit marked by a subtle reflection in a window, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Daniel Whitaker's journal, Catherine Walsh's evidence, and the sinister plans of PharmaCorp's head of security were laid bare, exposing the truth in all its raw complexity. Justice, elusive yet inevitable, found its way through the maze of lies and deceit. As the dust settled, Sarah and Daniel stood face to face, two strangers bound by a shared journey of discovery. In a quiet exchange on her porch, they reflected on the randomness of fate, on how a simple package delivered to the wrong address had set into motion a chain of events that would alter their lives forever. The VHS tapes, once harbingers of mystery and danger, now served as relics of a past best left behind. They stood as a testament to the power of truth, of how it can find its way to those willing to look beyond the surface, to question the narratives imposed upon them. And in that moment of quiet reflection, Sarah realized that sometimes the wrong address could lead to the right destination. Story 20. The old wooden plank shifted under her weight, revealing a hidden secret beneath the surface. Intrigued, she knelt down and traced her fingers along the edges, sensing the presence of a concealed space. With cautious determination, she lifted the boards, exposing a dark, narrow cavity beneath the house. Dust and cobwebs greeted her at first, but as her eyes adapted to the dim light, she discerned shapes within the shadows. A mattress, a chair. And nestled in the corner, a worn notebook filled with pages bearing a familiar name, her own name repeated over and over. Detective Morgan Reed observed silently as Sarah Coleman peered into the abyss beneath her new abode, a flicker of fear dancing in her eyes. It wasn't just the discovery of a hidden room, it was a violation of her sanctuary, an intrusion of malevolence into her fresh beginning. "Don't disturb anything," Detective Reed's calm voice broke the silence, authoritative yet soothing. She switched on her flashlight, casting its beam into the hidden recesses. The walls were adorned with photographs, stolen moments of Sarah's life captured in eerie detail, a shrine of obsession concealed beneath her very feet. Sarah had purchased the quaint cottage from the estate of an elderly man named Walter Green, a solitary figure with no known kin. The property had stood empty for months before Sarah's acquisition, described in the listing as charming and in need of minor updates. No mention of the sinister secret lying beneath its floorboards. "I never met him, the previous owner," Sarah's voice was a mere whisper. The neighbors claimed he was reclusive. "I was told that basement access had been sealed off long ago. That's what the inspection report stated." Crime scene investigators arrived, their presence marked by the thud of equipment against the wooden floor. They meticulously documented every detail, collecting evidence and retrieving the mattress, chair, and notebook from the hidden chamber. Forensic analysis unveiled a multitude of fingerprints, all belonging to Walter Green. What haunted the investigators was the timeline they uncovered. Walter had been surveilling Sarah for at least 3 years prior to his demise, existing in her periphery without her knowledge. He had shadowed her at community gatherings, trailed her at the grocery store, and lingered at the cafe where she occasionally worked. Yet Sarah remained oblivious to his presence. This level of fixation tends to escalate, the department psychologist remarked during a debrief. From fantasy to planning, the hidden room suggests he was preparing for a more direct approach. Detective Reed's inquiries led her to a former colleague of Walter's from the local shopping center maintenance team. The man appeared uneasy, his gaze avoiding hers as he twisted his wedding band. Walter spoke of her sometimes, he confessed hesitantly. Said she reminded him of someone. I thought it was harmless infatuation. I never imagined. His voice trailed off, eyes fixed on his clasped hands. Did he mention any intentions involving her? Reed probed further. Not explicitly, but he had this phrase he'd repeat about how she belonged with him. I assumed it was mere talk. With a warrant in hand, Reed unlocked Walter's workplace locker, untouched since his passing. Inside, a key with no matching lock in his residence was discovered. Tracing the serial number led them to a storage unit registered under his name. The metallic door screeched open, revealing a meticulous replica of Sarah's former apartment furnishings mirroring her bed, desk, and living room decor. A mannequin adorned with a wig resembling Sarah's hairstyle sat at the replicated desk. The most chilling detail was a calendar marking a date just a week after Walter's sudden death from a heart attack. The circled date bore a single word: together. It was discovered that Walter had been institutionalized in his youth due to an obsession with a female teacher, diagnosed with erotomania, an ailment where the afflicted believes in a reciprocated love despite evidence to the contrary. After his release, he led a quiet life until Sarah unknowingly triggered his dormant fixation. Spread across the police station's conference table were photos of the grim scene. He departed this world convinced of a bond that never existed. In his delusion, they were destined to unite, Reed explained. Could she have encountered him without realizing, sparking this fixation? A detective queried. Reed shook her head. No evidence suggests so. Sometimes these obsessions require little to take root. A passing smile, a moment of prolonged eye contact. For someone with his history, that might have been enough. Sarah made the decision to sell the house, unable to shake off the lingering unease. During the final walkthrough with her real estate agent, she stood in the living room, hugging herself protectively. I keep pondering what could have unfolded if he hadn't passed away when he did, she murmured softly. How long would I have resided here, unaware of his watchful eyes, unaware of the secrets concealed beneath my very feet? Following Walter's demise, the case was closed, classified as stalking with intent to abduct, though the abduction itself never transpired. Evaluations of the evidence indicated Walter's plan to confine Sarah within either the hidden room or the storage unit. Sarah relocated, altering her routines and guarding her personal information more closely. Detective Reed sporadically checked in on her, a silent acknowledgement of the peril she narrowly escaped. The cottage found new owners, a young couple oblivious to its dark past. The hidden room was sealed off, the floorboards replaced. Life persisted, but for those privy to the truth, the tale of the room beneath the floor remained a haunting reminder of the unseen perils, of monsters who slipped through the cracks, and of the victims who never realized how near they came to their own demise. Story 21. The ancient library faced its final hours before demolition. The diligent workers were on the brink of completing the task when a curious discovery halted their progress. A hidden latch, concealed within the depths of a bookshelf, was accidentally revealed by a stumble. With a gentle click, the entire shelf pivoted open, unveiling a secret passage leading to an unseen chamber. The air within was heavy, untouched by human presence for decades. No furnishings adorned the space except for a solitary chair stationed at the room's center, firmly secured to the floor. Etched repeatedly on the wall, a haunting message echoed, I am still here. The construction foreman swiftly contacted the authorities, sensing an ominous aura lurking within the hidden room. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of experience, arrived at the scene. His flashlight pierced through the darkness, casting an eerie glow upon the walls adorned with the unsettling message. "Secure the area," Walsh commanded the officers, his words resonating through the confined space. "Do not disturb anything until the forensic team arrives." The library's past whispered a tale shrouded in mystery. Once owned by the esteemed Harrington family, the building had been bequeathed to the public following the unexplained disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. Vanishing during her final year of college, Rebecca left behind only her abandoned car near the woods, vanishing without a trace. Despite exhaustive searches and inquiries, her fate remained a puzzle. While speculations hinted at her departure to forge a new life, her family vehemently rejected such notions, believing a darker truth lay concealed. As forensic experts meticulously combed the hidden chamber, they unearthed hair and fiber fragments embedded within the chair. Traces of blood and skin cells lingered amidst the scratches on the wall, hinting at a turbulent struggle endured by a young woman. The chair was designed for restraint, the forensic analyst observed, pointing to weathered leather straps and bolt holes. The occupant fought fiercely against their captivity. Walsh delved into the enigmatic history of the Harringtons, sensing a connection between the library's donation and Rebecca's disappearance. An unsettling revelation emerged: the contractor who installed the bookshelf had exclusive ties to Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the family's patriarch. Financial records unveiled exorbitant payments made to the contractor, surpassing standard renovation expenses. Former library staff expressed astonishment at the hidden room's existence, unaware of its presence. An elderly librarian recollected Maxwell's solitary visits to the untouched section, cloaked in secrecy under the guise of preserving historical integrity. The investigation took a chilling turn as DNA evidence from the hidden room matched samples obtained from Rebecca's personal belongings. The timeline began to unravel, painting a grim narrative of captivity and familial betrayal. Rebecca had not fled but had been imprisoned within the library, potentially by a relative. With a warrant in hand, detectives scoured the Harrington estate, unearthing a concealed journal within Maxwell's study. Detailed entries chronicled his disturbing fixation on his niece, culminating in a harrowing ultimatum within the final pages. Confronted with irrefutable evidence, Maxwell's composed facade crumbled. She threatened to expose everything, he confessed, devoid of remorse. Maxwell's sinister plot unfolded, luring Rebecca to the library, subduing her and concealing her within the hidden chamber. Tragically, a failed escape attempt led to her demise at his hands. "I had to protect the family's legacy," Maxwell admitted, his voice hollow and devoid of emotion. Beneath the floor of the hidden room, ground-penetrating radar detected human remains. Excavation unearthed Rebecca's skeletal frame, adorned with the silver bracelet gifted by her parents. The Harrington family witnessed Maxwell's sentencing, a somber conclusion to a tale of deceit and tragedy. Clutching her daughter's cherished bracelet, Rebecca's mother found solace in the closure that justice provided. The library's demolition stood suspended, transformed into a memorial where mourners paid tribute to a life unjustly taken. In a poignant twist of fate, Rebecca's haunting message, "I am still here," etched on the walls, ensured her enduring presence. Justice, though delayed, had finally unveiled the concealed truth, allowing Rebecca's spirit to rest in peace and her memory to linger eternally within the walls of the old library. Story 22. The hotel lay in a quiet corner of the city, a forgotten relic of a bygone era. Its faded sign creaked in the wind, beckoning weary travelers with promises of a night's rest. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, where the walls whispered stories of those who had passed through its doors. The receptionist, with weary eyes and a hint of unease, handed her the key to room 23. "Just avoid the last door on the left," he murmured, his words hanging in the air like a secret. Intrigue tugged at her, a subtle pull towards the forbidden. That night, bathed in the soft glow of flickering lights, she wandered down the hallway, pausing in front of the ominous door. The handle sent a shiver down her spine, the metal icy beneath her touch. The door itself seemed ordinary, blending in with its neighbors until she pressed her ear against it. A faint sound, a whisper of breath, escaped from the other side, stirring something primal within her. Detective Morgan Reed, with her keen eyes and weary soul, found herself once more at the scene of a tragedy. The room exuded a sense of foreboding, the metallic tang of blood hanging heavy in the air. The victim, a young woman with golden locks splayed around her like a macabre halo, lay still on the floor. Her eyes, wide and empty, gazed unseeingly at the ceiling, frozen in a silent scream. Reed knelt beside the lifeless form, her fingers hovering over the evidence markers scattered like ominous breadcrumbs. The forensic technician, his voice clinical and detached, catalogued the scene with a practiced eye. "Third one this season," he remarked, a grim echo of the horrors that had come before. As the investigation unfolded, Reed pieced together a puzzle of darkness and deceit. 3 women, all with a haunting resemblance, all taken in the quiet confines of cheap motels. The killer's signature, a chilling thread connecting the victims in a web of fear. The trail led to a man of power and privilege, his facade crumbling under Reed's unwavering gaze. Charles Emerson, with his polished exterior and hidden shadows, stood at the center of the storm. A man driven by secrets, by a twisted need to control the narrative of his life. Through interviews and evidence, the truth emerged, a web of lies spun by a man consumed by his own desires. Emerson's calm facade shattered, revealing a darkness that lurked beneath the surface. His crimes, a reflection of a soul devoid of empathy, painted a chilling picture of a predator in plain sight. The trial, a brief yet poignant affair, laid bare the depths of Emerson's depravity. Justice, cold and unyielding, sentenced him to a lifetime of solitude behind bars. And as Reed watched him fade into the shadows of incarceration, a sense of unease lingered, a whisper of the darkness that still prowled the night. The media dubbed it the door on the left case, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. But for Reed, the echoes of that fateful night lingered, a haunting melody that played in the recesses of her mind. In the quiet of the evidence locker, 3 hotel keys lay dormant, relics of a past best left forgotten. Symbols of a truth too terrible to comprehend, a reminder that some doors once opened could never be closed. And as Reed walked down the dimly lit hallways of her mind, she couldn't help but wonder what secrets lay behind each door, waiting to be unveiled in the stillness of the night. Story 23. In the hush of the night, a woman stood before her mirror, her reflection cloaked in mist. Strangely, an unease crept over her, a sensation that whispered of the unknown. Her features appeared familiar, her attire unchanged. Yet within the mirror's depths, a subtle shift danced at the corner of her eye, a phantom movement, a presence unseen. When she turned away, her reflection lingered, a silent sentinel in the looking glass. Thus began the enigma of Rebecca Thorne, unfurling like a shadow in the stillness of her solitary abode nestled in a tranquil suburb. Her demeanor, described by acquaintances as meticulous and solitary, painted her as a woman of routine, enigmatic yet courteous in her interactions with neighbors. Amid the humdrum of her days as a data analyst, her life unfolded in precise patterns, a tapestry woven with threads of order and exactitude, devoid of any hint that she would emerge as the focal point of an inscrutable mystery that would echo through the years. The first whispers of discord were subtle, a subtle rearrangement of objects within her dwelling, a subtle shift that eluded logic. A cup displaced, books rearranged, a toothbrush astray. These anomalies, initially dismissed as lapses in memory from long hours spent immersed in the world of data, eventually pricked at Rebecca's consciousness. It was only after a succession of such disturbances that she mustered the courage to seek solace in the arms of authority. Detective Marion Shaw, entrusted with unraveling the strands of this enigma, initially deemed the occurrences as trivial, leaning towards the realm of mental unrest rather than criminal intrigue. With no tangible evidence to grasp, the case found itself buried beneath the weight of other more pressing matters. Yet the pivotal moment arrived in the sanctum of Rebecca's bathroom, where her reflection dared to stray from the bounds of reality, beckoning a truth beyond comprehension. As Rebecca recounted the eerie tale to the detectives, a shiver traversed their spines. Surveillance footage unveiled a specter, a doppelganger, a mirror image of Rebecca, breaching the threshold of her sanctuary with a familiarity that defied reason. The intricacies of the mimicry, the uncanny replication of her essence, cast a veil of perplexity over the investigation, propelling it into realms unknown. Fingerprints whispered only of Rebecca's touch, DNA echoed her essence alone. The neighbors, mere shadows in the periphery, beheld nothing amiss in the comings and goings of the woman they believed to know. Amidst the tapestry of disquiet, Rebecca's reality unraveled thread by thread, a mosaic of incongruities that painted a portrait of intrusion, of a life pilfered in the shadows. The path to revelation unfurled as a psychologist's whisper of fixation, of obsession veiled in imitation. A colleague's shadow emerged from the depths of memory, casting a pall over the investigation. Lily Winters, once a presence in Rebecca's world, now stood at the threshold of obsession, her fixation a canvas of duplicity and longing. Within the confines of Lily's lair, the truth unfurled in chilling detail, a shrine to Rebecca's existence, a testament to the lengths one would go to inhabit another's skin. The mimicry, the replication, the erasure of identity all danced in macabre harmony within the walls of Lily's sanctum, a symphony of possession veiled in madness. And as the tendrils of justice sought to ensnare the phantom, Lily vanished into the night, leaving behind a void where shadows whispered of stolen identities and lives entwined in a dance of deception. Rebecca, cloaked in the mantle of protection, found herself adrift in a sea of uncertainty, a specter of her former self haunting the corridors of her past. The echoes of that fateful encounter linger, etched in the annals of Detective Shaw's memory, a testament to the fragility of identity, the sanctity of self. For in the heart of the enigma lies a truth profound, the essence of who we are, the tapestry of our souls, woven with threads of light and shadow, of whispers in the night that echo through eternity. Story 24. The village whispered not a word about the ancient house nestled on the outskirts of the dense woods. It stood solitary, a relic of forgotten years, its windows shrouded in darkness, its porch weary under the burden of time. No one laid claim to its ownership. No memory lingered of the hands that crafted its weathered walls. But when a band of wanderers strayed too near, they beheld a peculiar sight, names etched into the wooden planks, carved deep like cryptic omens. At the foot of the list, freshly etched and untouched by the elements, appeared a name alien to all, until a hushed voice quivered, "That name belongs to me." In the dead of night, a call came through to dispatch, cataloged as a routine trespassing incident. The voice on the line belonged to Mason Wright, the foremost of the hikers who stumbled upon his own name etched into the forsaken abode. The responding officers anticipated nothing beyond juvenile mischief, perhaps a jest among companions, yet what awaited them defied all reason. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as twilight draped the forest in shadows. Her flashlight pierced the darkness, casting light upon the worn face of the structure. The names 27 in total cascaded vertically along the eastern wall. Some had faded with age, nearly imperceptible against the weathered timber. Others remained sharp as if freshly carved, and at the base, Mason Wright, the incision still redolent of sawdust. "I've never set foot here before," Mason insisted, his words materializing in the frigid air. "I cannot fathom how anyone could know my name." The inquiry commenced with thorough investigations into the backgrounds of each listed name. The revelation sent chills through the detective team. Every name corresponded to an individual reported missing over the past 4 decades. Some cases had grown cold, others remained active. Yet all shared a haunting similarity. The vanished souls had disappeared while trekking alone. Forensic experts meticulously documented each carving, noting the varying depths, techniques, and weathering patterns. The earliest name, Rebecca Hansen, aligned with a missing person case from 37 years prior. The case files recounted the tale of a young woman who ventured into those very woods, never to return. Search parties unearthed naught but a lone hiking boot beside a babbling stream. Detective Keller subjected Mason to exhaustive interrogations. His narrative held steadfast. He bore no ties to the area beyond this particular hiking expedition with 4 comrades. They had selected the trail at random, spurred by an online recommendation. No aspect of his past linked him to any of the other names adorning the wall. The focus of the investigation shifted to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, proffered snapshots captured throughout their journey. Upon scrutinizing the images, analysts discerned a disquieting anomaly, a blurred figure lurking in the background of 3 distinct photographs. The silhouette bore semblance to a tall, spectral figure, perpetually obscured by the surrounding foliage. "We encountered no one else on our path," Emily maintained. "We would have surely remembered." Detective Keller sanctioned a sweep of the house's interior. Though the edifice appeared forsaken, cobwebs cloaking every surface, furniture in disarray beneath the structure, officers chanced upon a disconcerting tableau. Personal effects belonging to the missing wanderers were meticulously arrayed on wooden shelves: timepieces, rucksacks, cameras, billfolds. Each item tagged with a corresponding name from the exterior wall. Evidence technicians toiled methodically, recording each artifact. Beneath ultraviolet light, splotches of blood materialized on the concrete floor, traces of years past, efforts to cleanse them evident. Subsequent scans with ground-penetrating radar disclosed no subterranean remains beneath the house. Nonetheless, cadaver dogs persistently signaled toward the rear of the property, where the forest loomed thick and impenetrable. As the inquiry escalated, Detective Keller observed peculiar conduct from Mason Wright. He reported inexplicable phenomena, faint murmurs beyond his abode, footprints in fresh snow leading to his threshold but vanishing beyond, phantoms observing from the dim street. The department assigned an officer to safeguard him, yet Mason's paranoia burgeoned. A breakthrough surfaced when archivists unearthed land records concealed within county annals. The dwelling had belonged to a reclusive huntsman named Victor Blackwood. Locals seldom glimpsed him, recounting fleeting encounters with an uncannily towering, emaciated figure who shunned discourse. Blackwood had vanished without a trace 15 years prior, his disappearance uninvestigated. Armed with a warrant, Detective Keller delved deeper into the encircling forest. The search party stumbled upon an array of rudimentary hunting blinds, strategically sited along frequented trails. Within one blind, they unearthed a journal replete with meticulous observations, depictions of hikers, their paths, gear, and routines. The script mirrored the sparse existing records of Victor Blackwood. The entries grew increasingly macabre over time. Initial pages delineated hunting tactics for animals, while subsequent entries depicted humans as quarry their habits, vulnerabilities, and techniques for their harvesting. The final pages chronicled elaborate accounts of stalking each victim on the wall, inclusive of intricate explanations concerning his selection process. A manhunt for Blackwood galvanized across varied jurisdictions. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging canvassed the woodland. Tactical squads meticulously combed every crevice and cavern, yet the suspect remained elusive. Mason Wright ceased all communication. Officers dispatched to his dwelling found the entrance ajar, the rooms vacant. Adorning his chamber wall, freshly carved, gleamed a solitary inscription: "The predator becomes prey." The search for Mason persisted for weeks to no avail. Then, during a secondary scour of Blackwood's residence, forensic specialists unearthed a ghastly revelation. Concealed behind a false partition in the basement, they stumbled upon a small workshop housing woodworking tools, jars of wood preservatives, and a freshly carved wooden piece bearing a novel name not yet affixed to the external wall. Detective Keller recognized the name instantaneously. It belonged to the chief forensic examiner who had cataloged the domicile during the initial investigation. The examiner had reported indisposed that morning and remained unreachable by phone. Authorities erected an unceasing perimeter of surveillance around the dwelling. Cameras surveilled each approach. Motion sensors scanned for intruders. The snare was set. 3 nights later, sensors alerted. Surveillance footage captured a figure materializing from the forest, unfathomably tall and slender, moving with uncanny poise. The figure advanced directly toward the house, seemingly unperturbed by the vigilant watch. As tactical units closed in, the cameras briefly faltered. Upon restoration, the figure had vanished. To this day, the house remains under unceasing vigil. Mason Wright and the forensic examiner were never located. The investigation endures, with fresh resources allocated as analogous vanishings are reported in other wooded domains. The names inscribed upon the wall have transmuted into lore among law enforcement circles. Some officers shun uttering them aloud, others circumvent the case entirely. Local wayfarers now steer clear of the house, fearful that mere mention of it might consign their names to that grim list, the names unspoken by any. Story 25: The Enigmatic House. She crossed the threshold, the dust dancing in the still air around her. The abandoned house stood frozen in time, its peeling walls and draped furniture telling tales of neglect. Each room she entered felt like a loop, a never-ending cycle leading her back to the parlor. A peculiar mystery lingered in the air, whispering of secrets waiting to be unraveled. Detective Sarah Lind found herself at the heart of the enigma that was the Old Victorian. Forensic technicians moved silently through the dimly lit rooms, their presence ghostly in the eerie atmosphere. The house, once a mere curiosity, now bore witness to a tragic crime that had shaken the community to its core. The medical examiner's hushed voice revealed the grim truth about the young woman found seated in the parlor. Morgan Pierce, with her peaceful expression and hands folded neatly, seemed to be waiting for someone who would never come. The absence of struggle or signs of violence added a haunting stillness to the scene, sending shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. As Lynn delved deeper into the case, a tangled web of intrigue unfurled before her. Morgan, a bright and inquisitive graduate student, had been drawn to the house by its reputation for defying logic and reason. Her journal spoke of strange phenomena, whispers in the walls, shifting doorways, and a sense of being watched by unseen eyes. The discovery of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system raised more questions than answers. Her boyfriend's steadfast belief in her integrity clashed with the cryptic messages found on her phone, hinting at a shadowy figure who shared her obsession with the house's mysteries. Adam Reeves, an expert in architectural anomalies, emerged as a key figure in the investigation. His alibi seemed airtight, yet his connection to Morgan and the house ran deeper than mere professional interest. The revelation of a family curse, buried in generations of silence, shed new light on the dark history of the Victorian. Hidden compartments and ancient artifacts hinted at a power beyond human understanding, a force that manipulated perception and defied explanation. The tragic fate that befell Adam mirrored Morgan's own demise, both souls ensnared in a web of secrets woven by the house itself. In his final testament, Adam spoke of truths glimpsed in the shadows, of doors that led nowhere yet everywhere at once. The house, a living entity in its own right, held sway over those who dared to unlock its mysteries, drawing them inexorably into its grasp. The investigation may have closed, but the whispers of the house lingered on. Lights flickered in the darkness, and shadows danced behind curtained windows, hinting at a presence unseen yet deeply felt. The truth, like the elusive exit in a house of endless doors, remained just out of reach, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to seek it. Story 26. In the stillness of the night, a faint flicker danced across the baby monitor's screen, a subtle anomaly that caught the mother's eye. At first, she brushed it off as mere interference, a glitch in the technology. But then the audio crackled and a soft voice, barely above a whisper, pierced the silence, urging, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A shiver ran down the mother's spine, her heart quickening with a sudden sense of dread. Without a moment's hesitation, she bolted from her room to her son's nursery, the only sound echoing in the hallway being the frantic rhythm of her own footsteps. Upon reaching the nursery, her worst fear unfolded before her eyes. The crib stood empty, devoid of the precious bundle that should have been nestled within. Panic seized her as she scanned the room, her gaze falling upon a stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its glassy eyes fixed upon her with an unsettling intensity. In a frenzy of anguish, she screamed until her voice grew hoarse, her cries piercing the night and reaching the ears of concerned neighbors who wasted no time in summoning help. By the time authorities arrived, they found her huddled on the floor, clutching the stuffed rabbit to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. The disappearance of 4-month-old Samuel sent shockwaves through the community, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a haunting sense of unease. The investigation that followed yielded little in the way of concrete leads, no signs of forced entry, no clues as to how the infant could have vanished without a trace. Suspicions turned towards the mother, Rebecca, her history of postpartum depression and strained marriage casting a shadow of doubt upon her. Yet a breakthrough emerged when microscopic fibers, foreign to the household, were discovered on the nursery windowsill, a revelation that hinted at a skilled intruder gaining access from outside. As the focus shifted, a dark figure emerged from the shadows of the night, captured in grainy security footage from neighboring homes. The presence of a specialized climbing rope and a mysterious boot print in the garden's soil breathed new life into the investigation, leading to a startling revelation that turned the case on its head. With the return of Samuel, found alive in a secluded basement under the care of a woman named Elaine, the truth unfurled like a dark tapestry of betrayal and deceit. Elaine, Daniel's first wife, harbored a deep-seated longing for the child she had lost, a desire that spiraled into a twisted plot orchestrated with Daniel to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. The courtroom fell into a hushed silence as damning evidence was laid bare: the hacked baby monitor, the encrypted messages, the chilling whispers that had haunted Rebecca in the dead of night. Daniel's cough, captured in the background of the audio, sealed their fate as the jury swiftly delivered justice. Amidst the wreckage of shattered trust and broken dreams, Rebecca and Samuel found solace in a new beginning, far from the shadows of the past. The baby monitor, a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy, remained a stark reminder of the night that changed their lives forever, a night when darkness whispered its secrets, and the truth, though veiled in deceit, found its way to the light. Story 27, The Forgotten Doll House. High above in the attic, a place she avoided, she found herself reluctantly climbing the creaking stairs when a storm revealed a leak in the roof. The attic greeted her with a collection of abandoned relics, cloaked in layers of dust and draped with intricate cobwebs. Nestled in the shadows of the furthest corner rested an antique dollhouse, its miniature furniture meticulously arranged, frozen in time. But as she peered through the tiny windows, a sense of unease crept over her. The figures within were not mere dolls, they were intricately hand-carved replicas of her family. Each tiny figure mirrored the exact position of her family members downstairs, except for one peculiar detail. The figure meant to represent her stood near the attic door, eyes fixed on her. Rebecca Morgan tentatively traced her finger along the dollhouse's roof, feeling the indent where the miniature version of herself stood. A chill raced through her veins, unrelated to the draft whispering through the attic. This dollhouse did not belong here. It was not from her childhood home, but rather a rental property her family had recently moved into. The unfolding mystery began with Rebecca's urgent call to the authorities, summoning officers to the suburban residence where a family huddled in fear, refusing to return to the attic. Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially brushed off their concerns as a prank or figment of an anxious imagination adjusting to a new environment. However, the intricate detail of the dollhouse figurines caught her attention, each capturing a unique trait of the family members. Forensic analysis uncovered fingerprints on the dollhouse that did not match any of the family members, leading to a startling discovery of microscopic cameras hidden within the miniature figures, all linked to a sophisticated surveillance system concealed beneath the dollhouse. The Morgans' daily movements had been meticulously recorded, with the positions of the figures not only mirroring their current location, but also past instances, indicating a prolonged period of observation. "This goes beyond mere stalking," Detective Harmon remarked. "The level of obsession displayed by the perpetrator is unprecedented in criminal psychology." Further exploration of the house revealed a concealed entrance to a basement living space, where evidence suggested an unknown individual had been covertly residing beneath the unsuspecting family for weeks. Strangely, there were no signs of forced entry, and property records revealed a vacant period before the Morgans moved in, following the passing of the previous elderly owners. A breakthrough in the investigation came through digital forensics, tracing the surveillance data to an apartment across town belonging to Martin Wells, the son of the deceased homeowners. Inside his dwelling were walls adorned with photographs of various families and detailed journals documenting their routines with eerie precision. Wells' financial struggles post-parents' demise led him to inhabit the hidden space, monitoring tenants while collecting rent. The dollhouse served as his control room, the assigned forensic psychologist explained. Each figure symbolized someone under his watchful gaze. During interrogation, Wells maintained an unsettling calm, revealing his motivation rooted in a possessive delusion over his childhood home. The dollhouse represented his means of possessing both the property and its occupants, ensuring they adhered to his standards. Wells faced charges of stalking, invasion of privacy, and breaking and entering, prompting a reevaluation of real estate disclosure laws and agent responsibilities. The judge acknowledged the severe violation of the Morgan family's privacy, emphasizing Wells' intrusion into their sanctuary and personal autonomy. The case left criminologists unsettled, pondering how long Wells might have operated unnoticed if not for Rebecca's discovery. His journals hinted at a pattern of covert residence in multiple homes, turning families into unwitting pawns of his twisted game. The Morgans relocated, haunted by the knowledge that their lives had been scrutinized and manipulated. Rebecca, in her victim impact statement, confessed to lingering paranoia, removing all miniatures from their new home. Some days, she admitted, I still feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me, wondering if somewhere a tiny version of myself is being moved in a dollhouse yet to be found.